talking to you.
You talking to me?
We're talking to you. Good evening, everybody. Those in the chat room, those watching. It is Sunday, the 27th of August, 2017, and it's Pyramid Talk today. And on our panel, we have artists and we have Angel. Oh my goodness, I always do this. Don't turn off my feed. It's so embarrassing. We've got artists from many, aren't you? We've got Angel from America. We've got John the Morgile from America. We've got Ceres from Holland, Patricia from the UK, and me from the UK. And we're waiting for Chris to join us. Anyway, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. All right.
Joining us on Pyramid Talk. Shall we go into what artist has got then, and then have a bit of talk and questions when he showed us the stuff? Everybody?
Yeah, fine.
I'm going to show artists now. He's been researching and he's found somewhere he wanted to share. So I'm just going to present artists.
Okay, thanks.
There you go. It's all yours, artists.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I've done some research this week, and then I found an interesting ancient site, and that the location is here. You can see an arrow very small, but I will zoom in. You can see here, this is Spain, and I put an arrow on the location, and that's it's just in the northeast of, in the direction northeast of Madrid. And as you can see, the distance is about 108 kilometers. So here's Madrid, and here's actually the Neolithic site. It's called Tiermes in Spain. Now I'm going to do my text. This Celtiberian region in Spain, the people who settled there were the Aravashi tribe. This was the last known tribe to actually live on this site. And you can see here a picture how they supposedly looked like in that day. This site was possibly a Celtiberian hill fort or hill town surrounded by a fort. Because of the strategic location, the Romans at that time tried to occupy this site, and this tribe has had a lot of wars with the Romans going back and forth, and a lot of this site was destroyed by the Romans in that time. It was very sad. This is actually the site map you can see about this site. This is in Spanish, and I have translated to English, so you can see. We'll put the text in the screen as good as possible. Come on, work with me. Yeah, I have most of the text in the screen, I hope. And this fort hill was later occupied by the Romans. So a lot of buildings were destroyed by the Romans, and they built some of their structures on that site. So they basically tore down a lot of structures that were originally in this location. In about 141 BC, a treaty was signed with the Aravashi tribe, but it was broken many times by the Romans. Later, it was a Roman municipinium, and the original name was Romanized to Termes or Termani. The original name of this site is not known. There are some speculations, but the original name is not known. The ancient site is built of red sandstone, and I will show you some pictures of the actual structure. Here you have a passageway, and on the map it's the door of the sun rock cutout, so that's number 1. It's over here. So that is this. You can see some marks on the floor, some like they are worn out by some device that was sliding over this structure or rolling over this structure. You see the red sandstone they've cut in. Oh, this is actually a picture of the site. You can see all the kinds of construction, and now I'm going to explain the build-up of this structure. You can see I've put some colors in this to give an example how the structure was built up. So first off, the first of the structure they built was this blue part. You can see all kind of holes in it, possibly for a roof support support. You can all see all kinds of holes in it. And then the second one is the green one. Those are basically stones that are put in the ground vertically. So that was the second building construction on this site. And maybe there are a couple of hundreds of years between the later structures. After that, you can see the pink construction. Those are the stones that look a little bit more like the stones we use nowadays in a construction, but they are a little bit bigger. And the last construction is here in the red, and that is Roman, as far as I know. And that the T-shaped thing on top was part of a bath house. So a bathing house was built here to have a Roman bath house, and that is basically the construction of this structure. So it has a couple of newer constructions added to it after a couple of years, or maybe hundreds of years. That is not known. But you can again see, if I go back to the whole picture like this, you can actually see that the older structure is still the biggest stone. This is possibly cut out in the rock, but I'm not sure. Then they put those bigger stones in front of it, and then they built again with smaller stones and smaller stones and smaller stones. Like often the case is with monolithic structures, the technology becomes less efficient and less with high technology. The oldest one are often the best built and with the biggest stones. I have to go a little bit further. This is another
before
side.
you go, does that look like a face to you guys, or is it just me?
Oh, on top here.
Yeah, like almost like a sphinx, like the sphinx face, right?
Well, it could have been.
Dark eyes and a dark mouth ridge.
It could have been a statue. That is a possibility. In the text, they say it's a corner of a bathhouse, but they say all kinds of things, and they're often not sure. So it is there's a possibility that this was once a statue or a big head with the mouth and everything on it. That's a possibility. It's because it's one of the most recognizable things on this structure is that some like T-shaped, and indeed now you say it looks a little bit like a face. Yeah.
Is that part of a different building though?
Yeah, on top, this is Roman. All the smaller stones here are all Roman. This is Roman. You can see church, but that's in the background. Because all the smaller stones on top are from the Roman period, about 100.
What is what is the location there? Like what, maybe I missed it, but where's that at?
I can go back a couple of
I didn't see that part. Sorry, I was sharing stuff.
No, it doesn't matter. I'm glad to point it out again. Okay. This is Madrid in Spain.
Right.
If you go to the northeast a bit, where above here, Termes in Spain, that's actually the location. So it's about 108 kilometers from Madrid.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I'd missed that part because I was still sharing the link. So
it doesn't matter.
Perfect.
Okay, you can see this is on top. This is all Roman, smaller stones and Roman pavements. This gravel is placed later on, so it tried to make it look like it probably looked back then, but it's not done very nice. Good, because I don't like this. This is all speculation how it was possibly built. This is the backside of that structure. You can see again all kinds of scooped out things, like they scooped it out with an ice cream scooper. Again, some stair-like places. There's a lot of weathering on this old structure. The older structure has a lot of weathering on it. And again, you can see stairs going up here. You have to look very careful, but I can zoom in a bit. Maybe it helps. Over here, these are stairs going up. I have another picture.
Art in that sense of the past, of how they made anything big, that they're actually casting the stones instead of taking it out of a mountain somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if they casted the stones, but because most of the stones, only this one is just it's all red sandstone. Only this thing looks a little bit more gray with some sandstone things in it. But this looks like another kind of stone. So it's possibly that they casted this. You can see stairs.
As making your stone, so it's a sandstone.
Yep.
And doesn't that point a little bit to the casting technique they had then?
Mm-hmm.
The one for ages instead of years, 50 years max.
Yeah. Well, what I pointed out, you can see again here is that the other stair. We go back. This is the one angle, and this is, you can see you were looking that way in the previous picture. You can see stairs going up, and what is very important is this is also in Spain. Alto de Sacrificios in Spain, and this is actually in Peru. Again, you can see stairs going up. So I would really like to know why they had those stairs going up. Bigger stairs for bigger people, smaller stairs for smaller people. Only in this case, the stairs, you don't know if there were stairs over here because the weathering is so bad on this structure that it's hard to make up the stairs.
You know, podia chairs that are just like stairs. You sit at the edge, but the other one puts its feet at behind you.
Yeah.
So
no, it's a mirage.
Well, basically, again, they have stairs going up a structure, maybe to sacrifice things, you never know. But I just pointed out that, again, you have stairs on an ancient structure, you have stairs going up. And this, you can see the holes in the structure better, that they purposely drilled holes to maybe for a roof support or something. That's why. You can see this structure now, you know the construction, bigger stones, smaller stones, smaller stones. And if you go, this is the Termes in Spain, and now this is Tiwanaku in Bolivia. And in my opinion, this looks very much the same. Bigger stones would trade up, smaller stones. This is meant they built that in between. Again, here you can see very big stones at the gate, smaller stones used for the stairs, other smaller stones used for another gate. So maybe this was a whole gate at one point because it looks like it was broken off. So it's very strange that again in Bolivia, like I showed.
Do you think they built around it? Do you think that was already there and they built around that?
Yeah, those bigger stones were probably in place already because those are the biggest stones, and they built around it, between it. This one is also broken off. You see, here he goes. It's broken off, and then they built on top of it. So those bigger stones.
May I ask a question and interject something?
Oh yeah.
First off, that picture you're showing, those are all faces, different dialects of humans, different what do you call it? I don't call them different races because we're all the human race.
Yeah.
They're different. What do you call it? The word is eluding me right now. But of them, there's like 180 of them, if I remember correctly, 186 or something like that.
Different, and probably different tribes.
Right, different tribes, different, where people came from. You could tell certain ones are of Orient descent, certain ones are, Chinese, just by the way the eyes are shaped in different ways. Each one of them can kind of be circled down. And of them, one of them is a face of a very distinguishable gray, what we like to call the grays. Yep. And there's another face, which is of a different one. It's more the stretchy head, light bulb looking one. Yep. So I just think it's weird that within all those structures are two common faces of common aliens that we like to, point. The other one is the two where you show the stairs that are cracked, that you have like 2 or 3 pictures before this one.
That one.
That one. Will that actually fit together? Because the crack doesn't actually look like that is one rock that cracked. It kind of looks like 2 rocks.
Yeah, it's very hard to tell at this point, but at the lower part and above part, it looks like it could fit, but maybe there's something in between missing. Yeah.
It doesn't totally look like they would fit together, or that something was wedged out between them. But there's one cut that looks like it goes across the front, but then the crack looks like it would have separated and bent. So I think that's kind of weird.
Yeah, and indeed, in the first section of the stone, it looks like it could fit, but if you go to the back, it doesn't fit anymore.
You're laying this way as well. So.
Well, something that Chris had mentioned. Excuse me, 1 second. I got a frog in my throat. Hold on. Sorry. But one thing something that Chris had mentioned before, and maybe this is just throwing this out there, but if water gets into like a crack of a rock like that and then freezes, water expands right before it freezes, and it could crack something like that lickety split. Yeah.
There's also this other part, though, isn't there, as well? Is that when Chris was telling us all this stuff about the arcing and the strikes and all these great big things, there'd have been enormous, great like tornadoes, and then there's the kinetic energy in the tornado where things get picked up and put down in other places. Yeah. That's what could have happened with these two, that they've just been dumped there, but they're not smashed into smithereens, because in tornadoes and things, lorries get picked up and dumped, don't they? Some things get completely annihilated, other things get picked up and put down.
Well, in this one in Spain, in the background, I can
if you look at that rock right there, the one, you can see a ridge going across the front. Either that or it's something on the photo, but it looks like right above ground level, maybe a foot, is a ridge that goes directly across both rocks, kind of alluding that rock is in the position it was intended to be in. And also, I understand the power of water and expansion when it freezes, but if the pieces don't squish back together, then they were never one piece to start off with.
Well, yeah, indeed, but also in this one in Spain on the left, there's a piece broken off. You can't see it, but it's lying over here in the ground. And you can see in the background all kinds of pieces scattered around here, a lot of separate pieces, and indeed it's a possibility, Angel. Just real quick, now you can see that these two look a lot like the same, those two structures. This is another part you can see in the distance. You can see that T-shaped, maybe that was a sculpture at one time. Here they put some bridges just, and you can see those lines in the ground again. Maybe there were waterways for watering lower things on the ground. It's not really known. You can see again those holes here drilled, very smooth. You can see here actually the size of the cutouts. It's like they didn't finish it. They made they just were on the construction of maybe making this an aqueduct. It's a possibility that the Romans tried to shape it to make an aqueduct or something else.
Yeah. Sewage system.
Sewage system is also a possibility. You can see now this maybe to drain water from the higher building, because the Romans built on top, so they maybe want to extract water from it. Also, this is strange, this cutout is, they try to block it off. Also, that is the part. You can see this is those lines or track marks in Spain. And again, if you go to Bolivia, this is the San Piata in Bolivia, very big. Also, it looks a little bit like the Trimus in Spain. A lot of weathering on it. This here almost looks like it was melted at some point, that it was liquefied. Again, you can see here on top.
That's a take off, is it? Whoosh.
Yeah. And again, you can see those track marks, again, very straight. And then again here, later addition with smaller stones. In the distance, you have again additions with smaller stones. This is the site of that one in Bolivia. You can see that it's the weathering is very, a lot of weathering on this stone. Again, those holes, just like that one in Spain. They have all kinds of holes. Maybe a roof support. Again, this is our later structures, and they built mortar and smaller stones. And this one looks also very much like that one in Spain, only this is in Bolivia. So the same type of building technology was used, the same type of sandstone they carved in. This one is again in Spain. So this is a lot further on the structure. You have these terraces going down. This side is in Spain, and if you go one picture back, this is in Bolivia. So again, this is in Spain, and this is also in Spain, another section. So you can again see the same kind of building here. You have stairs going down in Spain. This is in Spain, and this is in Bolivia again. Also here stairs going down. You can see the same type of, strikes me that the same type of building construction you have on that side in Timas in Spain, and on the other side I showed with the stairs, that's also in Spain and in Bolivia. So a lot of structures that are built in Spain, they have more weathering on it seems. A lot of of these huge sites in Spain almost are duplicated in Bolivia and Peru, or the other way around. It's also a possibility, of course. Again, you can see those holes in the structure where possibly there was a roof support. So this is that guy again with the track marks. This is a cutout in the stone, very straight. So what I wanted to point out is that a lot of structures in Spain, I will go back to that stair one a bit further. This is also in Spain, and this is in Peru, and it looks a lot the same. And just like this one, this is in Spain, and this is in Bolivia, and it also looks a lot the same. So for me, it's very striking that the same time of technology was used in Spain as the same as in Bolivia and Peru, and that is so the knowledge of building at that time period was almost the same, and also the progression with using smaller stones after on the structure. So first the bigger stones or smaller stones. That is also the same in Spain and it's in Bolivia and Peru. So it's a lot of similarity in those structures. So the knowledge was widespread. That's what I want to point it out, and have completely something else. But I have to get that picture really quick. Just a second. I don't know if I showed it already, but it takes a couple of seconds to actually load the picture because it's a big picture.
Yeah.
Just a second. Come on.
It always takes a second.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Here it is. Now to go back and present it. Just to make probably Angel has something to tell about the pyramids. So I can make an in-between to from Spain and Bolivia to something in Egypt. And then he's going to go maybe tell us about his findings of Egypt structures. What I found in Egypt is this structure. It's about a couple of, 70 miles from the Giza Plateau. So that's not very far. Hope you can see it. Yeah, that works. Okay. Yeah. And this structure is 70 miles to the west of the Giza Plateau, roughly. And what is very striking that looks like built with very big stones because you can actually see the stones, different kind of stones. And if you go a little bit to the north on this side, you have this side that is also circles. And within those circles, that looks like aeroplanes. So I just put it out there because there's nothing known about this site other than location and some pictures from Google Earth.
Do you think they're birds?
No, it's way bigger. This is almost a football field across.
No, I don't mean that. I mean what those things are.
No,
they're aeroplanes. Can you zoom in on them anymore? Can you get closer?
Well, I have to use Google Earth, and it doesn't work in Google Earth at this Hangout because I now have Google Earth Pro, and it doesn't work in this Hangout. So I have to do it the other way around to take pictures and then present them. But this is the
same way.
Yeah, no, this one not.
So what is over there then? Do you know what's over there, like over the other side?
This is this structure, and if you go to the north, you have this. So it's very strange site near the 70 miles roughly from the Giza Plateau to the west. You have a long road, and if you follow that road, you come to this place.
If you go one image, you can see that the cross is actually
this one.
The cross is actually north, south, east, west orientated, and the circle around there. Then these lines, only one corner in 90 degrees, and it's left top.
Yeah,
like if you ask me, you can actually extend the lines and see where it lines up with.
Yeah, I can. Well, if you have just a second, I can open. Maybe I can open.
My wall is completely north orientated.
Someone in the chat room, artists, they say, what's the coordinates then off Google Maps for that?
I'm going to search for that just real quick. Just a second. It's a shame that Google Earth doesn't work on this Hangout anymore because suddenly I had Google Earth Pro. I didn't ask for it. It was there. The coordinates. I can put it in a Word file so they can read it.
If you put it in the chat here, I'll put it on the chat.
Okay.
So, Angel, John, what do you think of this structure with the planes?
Yeah, I'm just sitting here watching, blown away. I'm speechless. I'm just taking it in. Yeah, awesome stuff, man.
I am always amazed by the monolithic structures that are located on this earth.
And me too. And I found this one by accident.
And something that always comes up in pyramid talks, and I guess this is the first time I've done a pyramid show with you guys, but I'm sure the whole thing with, and forgive me if I'm off subject, but just want to maybe hear your guys' views on this. You know, the Great Pyramids at Giza, a lot of people seem to think there's evidence that those stones weren't quarried and carried up. They were poured into molds, which, you know, that may be true, but there's so many megalithic sites all over the place that were definitely not poured into molds. And do you guys pretty much agree, or am I like making sense here? Or
No, some structures look like they were poured indeed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was one of the things I was stumbling on, because I also follow the Bosnia pyramid. The guy, and he does all his research, and it's more open source and allowing the general public to come in and do hands-on. And one thing that they were luckily discovering is that many of the rocks they're finding on the surface of the structures, where they have flat areas and like patio type layouts, things that we would look at as, well, how did they get these rocks quarried and brought here? And they're finding they are definitely composite rocks. So, I mean, that, like I keep saying that Giza Antiquities is not going to let us take samples of anything and do any more research. Every time they do, they get eggs on their feet. So
I've probably have solved, I've looked it up on maps, Google Maps, so maybe I can share it now.
You can share something.
You have to.
I do think the timeline and everything else does say that the builders did have the technology of pouring and manufacturing. We think today is rock, but if we actually look at them under electron microscopes and other type things, we probably may be amazed to find out they're not truly organic rock. And we can tell that. Luckily, we have that technology these days.
Yeah, indeed.
What does that mean if they're not organic?
Well, a normal rock, a real rock that's found in nature will have a couple of properties. Number one, it should not have any water infused in it at all, because it will be made in the bowels of the earth under great amounts of pressure and usually great amounts of heat. So all the water itself will have both squeezed out of it and or boiled out of it. The other thing is, because it takes hundreds of years to cool, sometimes maybe months or weeks, depending on how fast it is, like a lava flow, the magnetic particles within the rock should orientate to north, which is how they can tell what quarry it came out of and what orientation the rock was sitting at the time it was quarried. And the other thing that they've recently discovered, at least with the Giza thing, is it should not have air bubble either. All three of these features are something you find in manufactured rock, because the air bubbles will be there because air is in there when you're mixing it in. Water is there because most mortar, cement, all that stuff, we use water to bond with the agents like lime and stuff to create the bond that makes it hard. And of course, it happens so quickly over a matter of days or hours. Now we have quick drying cement as opposed to months, years, and decades, that the fine magnetic particulates or fine metallic particulate would not have time to be affected by the magnetic pole of the earth, and hence you can't get a true reading. So that's what I'm saying. That's one way they can tell. The other way is just by really looking at it and seeing that it sometimes has weird stuff that a rock shouldn't have in it.
Absolutely. Now I have seen some instances where, like, there's like a sheer cliff face, and there'll be a perfectly square, rectangular block hewn just right out of the side of the cliff face. And it's one thing. First of all, it's really hard to cut through these super dense rocks. It's one thing to cut the two sides and the bottom out, but then, like, one of the things that they can't figure out is how did they cut it all the way back, the back of it, to get it out of the rock. And so there are a lot of places where, like, people are still left scratching their heads as to how exactly did they do that, because we can't do that with today's technology, right? So are you guys familiar with some of the ones I'm talking about? Maybe I can find some pictures and link them up.
Yeah, I know some sites that are in the deep that they cut out big stones. They even in Baalbek, they even didn't even finish cutting out the stone. Some people say it's poured, but looks like they were cutting it out. But it's so big that some of the corners are so straight that it's even hard with today's technology to accomplish such a thing here.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking to see if I can find a couple pics too. Sorry, so I'm sort of like multitasking, but yeah, awesome.
Cool. I see that the series has found the actual site, so you can show the surroundings a bit. Maybe that's fun while you're searching for the pictures.
Can you pull out any more series, or is that as far as you can pull out?
Oh, this is this structure, and these are the circles.
They're just in the north of that structure.
One of the biggest.
Oh, so which way are the planes facing to then? Where are they going then?
Yeah, that's funny. They're all pointing
Yeah, that way.
that way.
Only one in the right corner below is facing in another direction, but most of them are facing the northeast.
They're all pointing to Israel?
Yeah, basically they are pointing all to Israel.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, I think I just put a link. Yeah, I put a link in the side chat here, and this probably isn't a good example, but this is one of the ones I was just talking about. That's not a great example, but there's others that are similar, and I mean, these are really, really dense rocks, and they're natural rocks, and obviously, people or something with intelligence and opposable thumbs or whatever, cut these rocks right out of the sides of the mountains, and just cutting them out's one thing, and then lifting them and moving them's another, and then building things with them. Because I've worked on construction projects over the years, and we used a crane one time to hoist up. I think they were 5-ton granite blocks, which 5-ton granite block that's a big weighty block. But some of these things that the ancients, I call them the prehistoric civilization, because there's just so much evidence all over the world for civilization that was worldwide, and something happened at some point where we see remnants of this civilization, right? But if you can build structures with those size rocks, and again, I know what a 5-ton stone is like. That's a big pain in the butt, and it takes you a good hour just to get it off the ground slowly and position it perfectly with modern cranes. I mean, some of these things are like hundreds of tons, and according to modern science, they were using copper chisels, right? So,
and they're perfectly level most of the time. If you put a level on it, they are sometimes only 0.001 off, so very limited. And also, what is interesting, that you can see this looks like some sort of quarry. And one guy did some research and found the stones they extract from this site. And you see that hill in the background. They extracted these stones. They're probably some are 50 tons. And you have to get them over that hill, over that mountain. So about 20 kilometers over that mountain. And then you have to actually go again 50 kilometers to the actual site where they use these stones. So do that with a rope. It's almost
exactly. And in a lot of these places, they had to move them uphill, right? So that it goes a little bit more deep than rolling trees. And then you look at the what are the Moab statues? Maybe I'm saying I'm wrong, but it was like the big sort of Polynesian-looking faces statues. And then when they dig them out, it's not just their faces; they're actually they have legs. What are they called? Muai, right? Muai, is that right?
That would be
Muai, yeah. And those are still a mystery. So yeah, there's just so much awesome stuff that modern science just has the most ridiculous theories for. But go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But yeah.
No, it's you given a great extra on this hangout. Your input was great to point out that those structures are often they cut it out of a rock to actually mine them, and then they had to export them sometimes hundreds of kilometers, sometimes 100 miles away for actually to the actually location there their stones were used.
And are you guys familiar with the Hutchinson effect?
Yeah.
And this is theory based on my research, and it's not just a wild guess, but I pretty much concluded, just my opinion, that whoever was building those really, massive megalithic structures knew about harmonic resonance frequencies, because, if you find the harmonic resonance frequency, say that 10 times fast, of any object, if you vibrate that object at that frequency, then it actually, you can pick it up with your pinky finger. And another thing, this is sort of my second thing about it. You guys know how, like, if you spin a gyroscope, right? well, let me put it this way. Let's say you have a heavy gyroscope on the end of a 4-foot pole. And if you try to pick that thing up with one hand, you can't, because, you're not getting any leverage on it. But if you spin that weight at the end of the pole up real fast, you can pick it up and lift it over your head, and you don't need leverage. And so maybe they were taking these giant rocks and putting them inside of some sort of a wheel, right? And like building a wheel around it and then spinning that up really fast to make it more easily movable. But, it just makes more sense to me that they would use harmonic resonance frequency, because it makes objects literally weightless. So, yeah.
It's funny how you actually take the subject of Hutchinson effect. The other one was that you can actually see that how things are just like jelly falling out of each other. And it's kind of what this picture also shows in the rock, and how this kind of molded of it. It's pulled away in that sense out of what we figured is the actual disaster happening, and that's that whole electromagnetic effect. All these craters and such, and the actual big disaster for the whole. It's kind of a traumatic experience through humanity itself, and that's the part mostly hidden and never talked about. And that's practically also because the whole electromagnetic spectrum of that part of electricity, we know only half of it, and the other half is this stuff, that Hutchinson effect, and what Tesla did, and stuff. They knew about that technology indeed.
Right. I was going to mention too, and why Tesla always comes up in these conversations because why not, right? But people say, oh, electricity was invented pretty recently, and there's no way the ancients could have had electricity. But the thing is, electricity's everywhere, right? The Earth has a static electric charge, lightning, whatever, and we figured out how to sort of manipulate it and use it. But who's to say that the ancient civilizations weren't able to harness electricity, maybe better than we do today, using Tesla's, style free energy technologies, which also makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Angel, what do you think?
Magnetics are switch dielectric. That's the other part. You have electricity and you have dielectricity.
On which category? Because I've been talking about a lot of things. I do believe that electricity itself isn't something that, number one, I think I may not have mentioned this in these things, but I do not believe Benjamin Franklin was the one who discovered electricity. If somebody tried to repeat his experiment, they'd probably wind up dead. We know this because out in Arizona, they launched rockets up into storm clouds just to generate light bolts. And, they kept destroying their towers until they found out that you had to actually they were using just a 30 gauge wire. I'm sure Benjamin Franklin could not have spun a 30 gauge wire at his level of technology in the 1700s. And with that 30 gauge wire, the lightning bolts they had to actually ground them to an area several hundred feet from the tower, because they kept losing towers. When lightning comes down, it's going to do what it wants to do, and nothing really can control that. But that aside, I do believe that the knowledge of electricity has been known for a long time. I think, honestly, that people like the Templars, the Masons, the Priories, all those people have had the knowledge of it. They didn't want the general public to know, because then they could electroplate coin, which is, the one thing you don't do is you don't mess with the money chain, unless you're Christ. Everyone else usually gets killed, like, anybody who's tried to mess with the money changers through our past 300 years.
Well, another point on that too, differentiating between dielectric, static electric, alternating current, direct current, but you can plug in a positive and negative into a live potato and run a clock on it, right? So it's, I guess the point I would make is that, electricity, obviously it's not a discovery. It's, not an invention, it's a discovery that we've learned to manipulate and pretty much master. But yeah, like I totally agree that, everything has electricity in it. Of course, a potato is not a generator. It's not spinning any sort of, magnet around a coil or vice versa. It just has it, every living thing has that electric charge to it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be living things. That's that's one of the key things that makes living things living is the electricity that is either runs through it or maybe I was going to use the word capacitor, but yeah, I mean same thing. And of course, if you boil a potato, then it loses that prana or electric charge. And so
I think if you look throughout history, even before Edison discovered electricity, you'll find out that masons and wealthy people had copper roofs. And I think that was a collector, and they would short it to ground. And in the process of just shorting it to ground, they would be able to do electroplating. They would be able to make colloidal silver. They would be able to charge their batteries. What did they call them back at the days?
Weren't they discovered in Iraq, and they were in like clay jars with two
I do agree that the evidence of physical batteries, the Baghdad batteries, and there's also a couple of other ones. Those things that we pawned off as flower vases for a long time until we figured out what a battery was, and then we said, oh, those are batteries. Put them in the basement. It is the evidence of them having, using, and knowing of electricity is there if you're willing to look for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure that at least a few of you guys, if not all of you guys on this panel, are familiar with Christopher Dunn. Yeah. He's an engineer, and basically his theory about at least the Great Pyramids, bringing this whole thing back to the pyramids, is that, they were basically creating electricity through a piezoelectric effect where, because underneath the Great Pyramids, there's a lot of, I guess it's limestone canals and deposits. And during the rainy season, it would fill up under there. And during the dry season, it would deplete. But that the type of stone under there and the salinity of the water in that ebb and flow creates a very small electric charge. And it seems like the pyramids themselves sitting on top of it were also going through some chemical reactions and stuff that were powered by vibrations, piezoelectric charge. And, Chris Dunn's written a couple books about it. And I think that, he's right on the money because, if a civilization is advanced enough to even build, and even if it's poured stone like the Great Pyramids, to get that precision over such a large area, these people weren't dummies, right? And so, it wouldn't surprise me at all to find that they had technologies that, ran on electricity. And of course, if modern day, say the Smithsonian found this evidence, of course, what they're going to do is they're going to bury it because, they want to keep the whole line of evolution going. And we're always getting better. Our ancestors were stupider and, we're always getting more advanced. And, we talked about this last week. I think entropy, the exact opposite of that is what the evidence points to.
Can I just say, I went somewhere, I met someone in an elderly people's apartment. It's the block that's been built in the town down the road. She was telling me that they've put these rods into the ground and they're getting the electric for their building comes from the ground.
Oh, okay. Free energy.
So that's not a new thing, is it? Because this is what they were doing. Maybe it wasn't the sky they were getting it from. Maybe it goes into the sky. It was actually from the ground they were taking the energy.
Well, maybe if you put some sort of wire or something that...
It was. How she explained it to you, but I couldn't really ask many questions. It wasn't that kind of time where I could ask.
Well, maybe if you put a wire...
If you put down there, it's underground, and they tap into it, and the electric for their building comes from the ground.
Well, if you put it, maybe even you can get electricity from the ground, and if you connect it to the sky, that's also electric. You can make a system that goes round and round and will recharge itself all the time.
Yeah, because for every bit of altitude you gain, you also gain electric potential. And so, I think, it's definitely going to have to be grounded. And, I guess it's probably an argument in semantics whether it comes from the ground or comes from the sky. But I do know that a lot of, if not the majority of lightning bolts actually come from the ground. And, if you have any sort of electric circuitry that you're, let's say you're building a house and hooking up the electricity, you have to ground it. And so, there has to be a connection to the circuit has to be complete. But was this a pretty tall building, or Karen, or?
It's an apartment block. No, it's 2-3 stories high.
Okay.
2 stories high, I think. 50 apartments.
Huh. Yeah.
Is what she told me. I can ask more. I can can you show me?
Yeah.
I need to go to the office and say I want to know what they're doing here with the electric.
Right. Yeah.
Take some picture and if you can take some pictures how it actually works, you can.
That can I go and spy out the building? It's a brand new building.
Stuff. It's all about actually tapping into the circuit of what is there already as a potential.
Yeah.
Like the two mountains Chris mentioned in Africa. In one is higher, it doesn't contain ice, and the other one is lower, and that contains ice. And through that, you can actually see you have a potential of minus and a plus. And if you connect the mountains, then you can actually tap in the spike what you cause between the mountains, and on that you just tap into the circuit. You use that power what is going through there, and there is no creation of power. There's just a lot of potential around. We don't know about how it actually works, probably, and that's why we don't see it. How we can actually get free energy just by tapping into the circuit what is already there, into the batteries of Earth. You know?
Absolutely. And one thing I remember reading from Tesla, and I cannot find this quote again, but I remember it verbatim because it stuck with me for years. This must have been 20 years ago when I read this, but the way that he described it was that the Earth itself was basically a capacitor plate, and the terminology he used was that the ionosphere, let's say the ionus plane, was the other plate to complete that connection. And this makes way more sense than natural or modern science theory about thunder and lightning. Modern science theory does not have a cogent, complete explanation for the phenomenon of thunder and lightning, just like they don't have a cogent, complete explanation for the phenomenon of tornadoes. They have theories, but like the theories for the cause of lightning range to things as bizarre as like cosmic rays. But when you look at it from the perspective that Tesla was talking about, it's like, yeah, makes perfect sense. And I think that the ancients knew this stuff. I mean, it's so simple, but it just seems like the powers that ought not be, instead of wanting to benefit mankind with technology, they want to enslave us by it, right? I mean, for lack of a better word.
I mean, all the sciences in that sense, they make it especially difficult to understand, use the most complex words, but all the principles themselves are very simple. They just make it impossible to understand it through their explanation.
Right, and a lot of the explanations make no sense. Like when I debated that Dr. Josh Grinley way back, we were just, he disagreed with everything I said basically, but I just threw something out there just to see what he would say, because there are a lot of, I guess you could say, cutting edge younger scientists that are basically theorizing that inertia is actually an electromagnetic phenomenon, and I agree with that. But so I asked, the doctor, I said, do you think it's even possible that inertia is an electromagnetic phenomenon? And he basically regurgitated the textbook definition of inertia, and it's something just ridiculous. It's like, no, that's not what it is. Inertia is caused by a piece of mass that has inertia. And I'm like, what? That doesn't explain anything. You just, you know what I mean? That's so funny because it happens so much with modern science.
The word inertia connected to the Earth, the plane of Eartha. It's the still point of the whole toroidal field. It's still point in the middle, and that's the plane of inertia, and that's where we live on, plane of Earth. And
gotcha.
It's also what we observe are the inertial planes of those fields, and that's why the moon probably is that cookie. It's a flattened disk in a sense, and it's a translucent half shine through, and we can probably see the shadow of on the backside come through it as well. It's a lot of studies still of how that actually works, but so far we figured it's a cookie because of how the edge of the faces are actually very sharp at the edges, but very flat when you go over it, and that suggests how the form is towards us.
Have you guys ever heard, and again, I know I'm bouncing back and forth here, but we were on the topic of pyramids and ancient civilizations, but I remember learning a long time ago that there was it was a female mummy, and they did, blood tests on her or whatever. I don't think she had any blood, but they found cocaine and nicotine in her system. And, back in ancient Egypt times, whenever that was, right, tobacco and cocaine leaves were strictly native to South America. And so this suggests, to me, it's pretty good evidence that, this ancient civilization, they had, I'm not going to say global, worldwide trade, and so...
It doesn't surprise me because, like I showed before, all those structures around the world look the same. They're built with the older structures is built with the same technology in Spain, in Russia, in Bolivia, in Peru. And you can see the later additions to that structure also built with the same technology, only less advanced as the structure they built before that. So it becomes less and less advanced and smaller stones. So it doesn't surprise me because all around the world, those ancient structures look a lot alike, and the progression of the structures and the later addition to the buildings are also the same, that there was a worldwide trade also with spices and that sort of things. It doesn't surprise me that was actually the case.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and it really, it doesn't surprise me because like I said before, if civilization is technologically advanced to do all these crazy feats, I mean, to me, I think it's very just nonsensical to say that there's no way they could have figured out electricity when we all know it's all around us, it's within us, it's everywhere. All you have to do is figure out how to harness it. And another thing that you had mentioned, like electrical engineers know how to generate electricity. I mean, it's pretty simple, it's not that hard, but in terms of what's actually going on inside of the electric circuit, that it's really just theory, because it goes back to quantum or atomic theory, where you've got the nucleus of the atom, protons and neutrons, and then around the outside you've got the electrons. Now, of course, nobody has ever imaged or taken a picture of an atom, and certainly nobody's ever taken a picture or imaged a subatomic particle like an electron. And so, of course, the theory with an electric circuit is it's a transfer of electrons, like a daisy chain transfer of electrons from atom to atom. But again, it's like
water. The whole theory is when you start working with it, you learn it's like water, and every electronic part has a particular function in how you divide it or make it less, make it more, let it pulse, or all kinds of functionality in there. And all these things you can kind of use as tools for how you can program with hardware, and that's how they build hardware.
Well,
creating a program to work with the electricity and then let that have a function through light, through your TV, in a computer, etc.
Here's something to chew on now that we're on that little tangent. I'm just dragging you guys all over the place. I'm sorry, but think of the amazing hardware and software. We'll just say software that starts with a single seed or say a single sperm, and it has the software, just software, and a little bit of biological material to grow an intelligent, conscious piece of hardware. That's our bodies that self-replicates. That if you break something or cut yourself, it heals. Like, how hard would it be to write software that all you have to do is give it a piece of dust, and that software will program that piece of dust to grow and turn into a thing, a living thing. I mean, it's impossible. It's mind-boggling. I mean, I don't think we'll ever have that kind of technology. And yes, we're scratching the surface of DNA code and that, and the other. But just the amount of intelligence that went into whoever wrote this code must be just ridiculous, right? So,
multi-dimensional code.
Well, there is also some speculation about elongated skulls. I put in the Hangout chat, I put a link to it. And Brian Forrester is one of mine, almost my idols, because he researched a lot.
What was the name? I'm sorry.
Brian Forrester.
Yes, I know who. Is he the one that showcases the giant skulls?
Yeah, also because you were talking about intelligent people,
right?
And yes, he had put out a video. I put it in the chat. I hope Sirius can find the link and can play it for us, because he explains you have elongated skulls that were formed by using boards to represent an ancient, probably ancient people, and he also shows that some elongated skulls are just formed naturally. So if Sirius can go back to the beginning of that clip and show it now, it is very interesting.
I'm not sure if he did it. I haven't seen this clip, but they do show how where the spinal column connects to the skull itself. It's further back in the head.
History.
Okay.
Today, I'm going to show you the difference between the Paracas ancient people and other people who have lived in this area. Now, this person is an example of Inca, not Inca as in royal Inca, but Inca as in the time period of the Inca. This is a normal shaped skull, and this person's cranial volume was 1,200 cubic centimeters, which is an average human. Now, this is an example of cranial deformation. The volume of this skull is 1,100 cubic centimeters. So again, basically normal. And you can tell, obviously, the deformation by the way it was flattened. String was wrapped around this way, possibly a board or some kind of material this way when it was a child, and the flattening was done in order to create this shape, which was desirable by these people. Now, another clue here is you see 3 cranial plates, which is normal. Your skull has that. The frontal, and then the 2 parietal plates. Now, the Inca one has that as well. It's a normal feature in a human being. And then we come to the Paracas. And this skull is very different from the other 2 I've shown you in many different ways. One thing is, in terms of plates, there are only 2. There's 1 frontal and there's 1 parietal. There are not 2 parietals, only 1. The volume of the skull is 1,500 cubic centimeters, so 25% larger than the Inca skull, shown as the example of what normality is. Also, the eye sockets are much larger. The nose seems to be larger. It has these 2 holes in the back, which are indicative of where nerves would come out of the skull to feed this part of the head. That is not a normal feature in a human being, in a normal human being. Now, the shape clearly could have been achieved via deformation because we can see this obvious transformation here. However, it's the volume and the fact that there are hundreds of examples of this. There are actually 5 different kinds, 5 different styles of elongated skulls here in the Paracas History Museum. That could represent 5 different social classes. We don't really know. No one studied this since 1928. But what I really want to do, because there are so many people interested in these skulls, is to slowly rotate you so that you can stop and freeze frame it if you want at any given time to have a look. The jaw is also much larger than a normal human being, and there seems to be a genetic tendency to have fewer teeth, especially molars. In some cases, there are at least 4 molars missing, other cases 8. And some people have said that that would be the result of a poor diet, which isn't true because the Paracas area was incredibly productive in terms of producing food, both seafood and also land-based agricultural products. And then this, we see, is an example of where trepanation occurred, brain surgery. Again, something seemingly pioneered by the Paracas and later adopted by people such as the Inca and the Nazca. So this is just a brief introduction to what I wish to show you here at the Paracas History Museum, and feel free to come at any time and explore this phenomenon with us. Thank you.
Okay, that was it, Sirius. You can stop in now.
Thanks, series.
So that is basically showing that there was a Paracas civilization with bigger skulls, with a bigger brain volume, and nerves up on to the top that could put in the higher parts of the brain, and the brain volume is bigger, and the features are also bigger. And you can see the comparison with his head, that the skull is much bigger. So probably the people were a lot bigger than that we are today. So about 7 foot, 6'11". So again, those people were bigger than that we were and had probably a bigger brain.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's weird because if you look at some of the ancient Egyptian murals or whatever, they depict the exact same thing. People with really tall, elongated skulls. And, of course, you have tribes like Forrester said, you have tribes that will board their children's head up and tie ropes up to them to achieve that effect over the time. But there's obvious signs, that they've done that. And it really seems like they were trying to mimic these, for lack of a better word, maybe Nephilim, maybe just our ancestors who were, a whole lot smarter, a whole lot bigger. But again, the Smithsonian, they trash all this stuff because they do not want to let go of evolution. And, if people are getting stupider and smaller over the, centuries, then evolution doesn't really work with that. You know what I mean?
No, you can see that in the building structures that a lot of older buildings are more advanced and they slowly get simpler and simpler with smaller stones. And you can also see that with the Scully showed, people were bigger, they had a bigger brain volume. Probably the people were slowly getting a little bit bigger at the time.
Higher chakra into the brain.
Yeah, say that again.
It's like they have actually materialized the higher chakra into the brain.
Yeah, and for some sort of reason, those older again, for some sort of reason, those older skulls have that part of the brain still, and it slowly went away after a time of period. Why it was is gone, we don't know, but it's very visible in that presentation of Brian Forrester.
Sorry, I have to get used to unmuting. But yeah, Forrester's done some good work, and of course he gets ridiculed. Anybody that does good work, and it's we're just talking about observations, the scientific method, and if they find things and teach other people things that fall outside of the accepted narrative, then they get ridiculed, they get blackballed, and we see that time and time again where science it's no longer, and especially theoretical sciences, but even like anthropology and geology, there's just so much theory involved that they take as gospel. If you go against that grain, then you're ostracized, and it's just awful that what's happened to, because science is one of those things that should be sacred. Truth should be sacred, and unfortunately, we live in a society where the people in control just absolutely do not want the truth coming out.
Jonathan, just real quick, if Siri puts up my picture, you can see a statue that is in Luxor in Egypt. You can see this is maybe a little bit too far, but they picked a smaller person that is clearly an Egyptian in the time period. And you can see the statue behind it. It's, maybe 12 feet. So maybe this is their way of telling us there were bigger people in the past.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why not. I mean, and people unearth giant skeletons and skulls all the time. Of course, they go straight to the Smithsonian. They put it in the basement, according to them, and you can't go see them. I think they incinerate the darn things. Maybe they're trying to get DNA out of them or whatever. But it's all a big cover up. History is, and even some sciences are maybe unwittingly participating in this cover up of who we are and where we came from, and what is the meaning of life? What is our purpose for being here? And that to me, that's a shame. That's a big shame.
Well, the evolution of the human race is proven wrong. And it's a lot of evidence, the way they tell us at our schools and everything, that it is wrong. Well, what other things they tell you can you trust? It's proven wrong. And the whole structure of the human progression is lost if you have a hard evidence of humans digressing at a certain time period and become stupider, smaller, everything. And you have evidence for that, and you can provide some hard evidence that is really the case. The whole history of the human race becomes obsolete.
And I definitely agree. Although I think maybe instead of de-evolution, it could just be gene expression, because and we actually talked about this last week as well. But I just think it's so fascinating because gene expression is definitely a thing, that's for sure. But if you put creatures into a higher barometric pressure environment with a higher oxygen content and a more powerful magnetic field, things grow giant. That's gene expression.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, scientists will go up or down to the Antarctic or Arctic and glaciers, and they'll take deep core samples of these glaciers, which is permafrost. This stuff has been frozen for billions and billions of years. No, I'm kidding, but long time. And they can tell by the content of each little layer of ice that yes, there definitely at one point in the past there used to be all of these things: higher barometric pressure, more powerful magnetic field, and a higher oxygen content. And so that's a recipe for giant. And so,
a lot of animals were bigger in the past too. If you see a normal elephant nowadays, compare it to a mammoth was much larger than most of the elephants today. And you can also see that with those giant walking birds in Australia, they have still exhibit of those giant birds that were living on the continent of Australia. And nowadays we have only emus and ostriches that are a little bit big walking birds. But back in the day, you had birds that were walking like ostriches and emus, and they were about 12 feet high. And there were a lot of them. They became extinct because in Australia, a lot of animals became extinct because they introduced cats to that island. The cats ate most of the eggs back then.
Right. Yeah. When humanity tries to alter nature, there's always consequences. Like I'll give you an example. I grew up in Florida, and there was always a big mosquito problem here. And to solve the mosquito problem, instead of spraying pesticides, they were genetically modifying mosquitoes so that they couldn't sting you, couldn't bite you to transfer like whatever diseases they're always trying to scare you with, like West Nile virus and blah, blah, blah. But so what happened was in certain parts of Florida, these genetically modified mosquitoes actually somehow made their way out of the college lab that was doing the genetic modification. And they ended up the population exploded of these. They're still mosquitoes. They just can't bite you. But they didn't have any sort of natural predators. They were eating the real mosquitoes' food. And so now, like, I don't know if it's still a problem. This was years ago. But yeah, they had a big problem with these genetically modified mosquitoes that were intended to, prevent people from getting these blood diseases that mosquitoes allegedly can carry. So, the way that I look at it is if there's, everything in nature has a purpose, everything. Yeah. And, I hate bees. If I get stung by a bee, I'm highly allergic, right? But at the same time, I know that we need them because, they pollinate everything. And I know that in America, at least, the bees are really not doing too good. And the theory that I subscribe to on that, because it's a big mystery, nobody can figure it out. But when you have all these radio frequency waves coming from towers, not satellites, maybe balloons, Wi-Fi, and just more towers than ever, the bees they're not able to navigate because they navigate by the magnetic fields of the Earth. And so when you throw in all this interference in the form of radio frequency waves, they can't find their way home, they get confused, and you have mass bee die-offs. And if this keeps going at this rate, in the next 20 years, if you like coffee, you better switch to something else now, because, or if you like pretty flowers, or if you like oranges, anything that gets pollinated by bees will go extinct. And,
yeah, indeed. I even saw a video that some flowers only react with pollination on the bees if they change the frequency of flapping their wings, of a bee. They change the resonation frequency of their wings, so the pollination comes out of the flower. So if you have a lot of interference with that frequency, it doesn't work. And not all flowers work in that kind of way, but a lot of them do.
Well, it's funny, and I'm going to mention something real quick, and then I have to go walk my dog. She's crying at me. But you know the old saying that bumblebees tongue twister. Bumblebees shouldn't be able to fly, but they can. And of course, the old cliche is the reason they can fly is because nobody told them they couldn't. It's supposed to be inspirational, but actually, what it is when they flap their wings, they're creating a vibration that is in harmonic resonance with their body. They have these little pits under their wings that sort of allow that vibration to resonate, and so that ties into the Hutchinson effect. And yeah, I mean, I hadn't heard what you just mentioned, but it doesn't surprise me that because again, everything in nature has a purpose, and that's really cool. You learn something new every day. Cool. And I am gonna go walk my dog. It shouldn't take me but a few minutes, but she's crying, poor baby. So I'll be right back, guys.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay.
See you.
Thanks, John. Yes, well, nothing is as it was, is it?
No,
exciting. It's exciting as well, but it just makes you feel so stupid. You didn't know these things before, but then you've got people like Angel and you artists searching, so it's great.
Well, we're here to educate people and give them stuff they can further research on, so they can do further research on some type of subjects. And it's always great to have more people on a hangout and more people seeing these kind of videos, so they can do more the research themselves, because a lot of people are skilled in different kind of way and look at a picture in a different kind of way, or look at the subject in a different kind of way. And so therefore, if you have more people looking at the subject, the chance of solving the riddle of a subject or get more information about the subject, the chances of that is very high. So that's why I love this hangout, to actually learn something about ancient civilization, learn something about magnetism, electricity, and all that kind of thing. I'm very happy to be part of this group and learn so much about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, well, that's what we are. We're researching live as well, aren't we? You've gone and brought some bits to the table, and now people are talking about what you've been looking into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Angel, ask Angel. Angel, what have you been doing then?
As far as right now, or research?
Research. Have you been doing anything in the last week? Or
well, like I said, I've been looking into the Bosnia thing. They released a couple of videos, and it kind of agrees with what I'm saying. If they can truly document, which I believe they have, that those rocks in Bosnia are composite, then it kind of opens the door to like questioning other rock. It's been like taboo not to question it, and the Giza antiquities get upset when people take a little fragment of a paint sample to test it. I don't know if you heard about that. Like 2-3 years ago, they were like all up in arms and ready to sue people and close the whole monument down. Not let anybody in there because somebody borrowed a paint sample. Oh, yeah. But they are very fearful, I'm sure, of ruining their cash cow. And honestly, I think if the truth about the structure was really researched, whatever the truth is the truth, and people would probably still want to go there and look at it. But I mean, they have their cash cow of their tomb thing. They really don't want to derail that, and anything that goes against it, they put in the basement. But in the past week, I've been moving my whole setup from one room to another. I got myself a higher grade mic and a couple of other things, and I'm looking at getting a better camera set up and hopefully re-recording a bunch of my videos. Eventually, I want to get into doing some physical modeling. But of course, I really want to work with some CAD modeling first, because it's a lot easier to change some variables in CAD than it is to rebuild physical models just to experiment.
Yeah, well, it's great that you're building models of everything and get a better look how actually those pyramids work and what they were used for, and try some things out if they how it works. So, and building a model is probably the best thing to do indeed.
Right. Well, if I can show function, and kind of like John was saying, I started down the Chris Dunn path, but there were things about Chris Dunn's view of the system. It's not truly a theory, but that don't hold water. And as you guys know, I really focused on getting getting all the video and pictures and everything I could to actually build a model, both mentally and physically, of the pyramid and work with reality as opposed to like, oh, we can put a door here and a hinge there and a plunger here and a pump there, which is great and wonderful, but that's not what's physically there. These are re-engineering of the structure, not reverse engineering.
Then you try to build it as accurate as possible without adding anything.
Right. I want to see what the physical, if someone were to restore that structure to how it was in about 840 AD or 815 AD, whenever we started to break into it, that what would that structure right there do with a couple of change of environmental variables, but change in the structure?
I build this as pure as possible and see what with the different environments what it does indeed.
Right, and that will kind of show function. Of course, there'll still be people that say, "Oh no, the king wouldn't have wanted it that way," or as other people have said, "Oh no, but this actually had a golden pyramid top." That's great. You want to stick it up there? Let's see how it affects the CAD, but let's really work with the structure that's at hand as opposed to the embellishments of story.
Yeah. First, do it as pure as possible with the structure at hand, indeed, and build it as in a scale model as accurate as possible, and then see what it does. And then you can always add things to it to see if something changed or not. But need basically,
right.
But you have to start with the basics, and then you can also.
Well, I look at it. I don't know how far you guys have really delved into cold fusion and other things of that nature, but also with vaccine testing, what people will do is they know the truth, especially with vaccine testing. They know the truth, so they will skew the test results or skew the lab setup to be different. Like if I took a Bunsen burner, which I'm sure you know what it is. You put gas in it, you light it, poof, a flame comes out. You usually put it under a beaker to heat something. But if I said, look, this Bunsen burner is meant for flame to come out the top, and you said, no, it isn't. And I said, yes, it is. And you said, look, and you hook it up to a water hose and say, look, no flame is coming out the top. You've just proved me wrong. Or have you? Because you changed the variables, the environmental variables of how that device was intended to be used. But if I turned around and hooked it up to gas and then poof, it magically held a flame and made it in that perfect little shape that they like for the Bunsen burners, then you could turn around and say, oh, well, that's just possible. It just happened to work well. So there's always going to be the naysay, no matter what you do. But the problem is that I want to have so much compounding evidence that this is what it's designed to do, especially when I get into what the supporting structures, the one we were looking at the other day where we put the little guy inside. As soon as I can show the communication, how it relates to the function of the structure, it really should hopefully put so many nails in that tomb coffin that they won't be able to resurrect.
Yeah, it's a great way it's great that you are actually building those things and you can prove your theory, and that's great.
Like we showed a Lord Kelvin drip generator, I think a week or so ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
Right. So if I told you that, hey, I can make a spark out of that, same type of setup, but you skew it a little bit, or you put it on a metal plate instead of a wood table so the two pots short out between themselves, then you'll never build up the differential in the potential that will generate the spark. You can skew the test results and make it fail. And that's really that is kind of really what, the scientists that know the truth want to do, especially with cold fusion. They'll make it at the wrong temperature. They'll make it at the wrong, like John was saying, they'll put too much pressure, too little pressure. They'll do something to skew it so the right result doesn't come out. And then they'll say, see, you didn't do it right.
Yeah, or they secretly add something you can't see in the actually test setup and screw it up on purpose with other kind of liquids or need other kind of pressures.
Right. I don't know how familiar you guys are with Eric Dollard. I think we mentioned him, but he's kind of working with some of Tesla's technology. And one thing that he points out is you need to recreate it exactly how Tesla said to do it, observe the result, and then go ahead and make modifications. But you can't make modifications, get a failed result, and see, Tesla was a moron.
Exactly. And I'm back, guys. And, it's so sad. It's so sad because the same sort of thing applies to the medical sciences as well, especially this day and age. A prime example, well, two, I'll just mention one. If you haven't seen the Dr. Brzezinski film, the Food and Drug Administration did pretty much the same thing to him.
40 years ago?
Yeah, he's been curing cancer since the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one example. But another one that was actually before that, they developed a drug called Laetrile for cancer, and it's a synthesized B17 vitamin. That's the active ingredient in it. And Laetrile had great success. But what what cancer doctors do now is they'll basically kill you, bring you to the brink of death with radiation and chemotherapy, and then like when you've got a couple weeks left to live, they'll go ahead and try the Laetrile on you, and then the person passes, and they say, "Oh, failure for Laetrile."
Right.
And
they kind of do the same thing with Brzezinski's right now. Brzezinski makes the neoplastons, which is an enzyme that helps fight the cancer. But what they're doing is they're giving you the neoplastons in complement with chemotherapy. So it's just maintaining your death. You're killing you slower. So you see, look, we're getting positive results as they hit you with chemo, and you usually wind up dying from complications of the chemo as opposed to cancer. But either way, you're dead, and they get lots of money in a new court.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And
what also is the case, what also helps a great deal with ailments is propolis. And I can't say this enough. Just do the research. I can quickly. You have now propolis pills. My dad was in surgery some time ago, and because of the surgery, there was he had a virus in his body, and they had to peel his thing with his near scrotum. They had to peel that and get all the stuff out. And after that, his immune system was so low, he had to take some vitamins, but his muscles and everything was still aching even after a year. He had still all kind of muscle problems. He bent over, he had back problems. If he lifted something a little bit too heavy, what he normally could easily lift, he had the back problems. And now he's almost 2 months on propolis, and all of those problems are gone now. He can ride. He could only ride his bike about 5 miles. Now he can basically 20 miles, 30 miles. He couldn't run anymore. Now he can run a couple of miles again. And he basically didn't change anything in his food. He only took one propolis pill every day, and after 2 months, we already seen the results. And there are a lot of videos on the internet also about propolis, and you can see the changes in somebody, and that their health is improving. Even it reduces the growth of cancer. Somebody showed, and there are a lot of videos about it. So also that is it's a natural antibiotic that is made that is in the beehive. They extract it from the beehive, and you can have it in liquid form, and you can take pills, and it's amazing how they work.
I had never heard of that, but that's interesting. And just to finish up the thought, Laetrile, well, first of all, something you mentioned that, you can take a full-grown healthy person and give them chemo and radiation, and it may kill them. And, somebody that I've lost a good friend to cancer in the last couple of years, and he did a whole round of chemo and radiation, and it was in his sinuses, which are very hard to get rid of. And he was cancer-free for a little while, and then they found it again, and they were going to do the chemo and radiation again, and he basically opted out. But it was, it was definitely the chemo and radiation that led to his death. Now, just to back up the wagon a little bit, Laetrile is basically synthesized, and it does work, but the active ingredient is it's vitamin B17, which is very hard to find. It's got cyanide chemically bonded in they smell like a very bitter almond, and cyanide smells like a very bitter almond. But the way that B17 works is that it's not going to hurt you if you eat it, but what it'll do is it'll enter the cancer cell wall and release cyanide within the cancer cell wall, and it kills the cancer from within. And so the natural way to get it, and I always prefer natural things, is you can order they're called apricot kernels. You cannot get them domestically from the United States because what they sell as apricots here are like genetically modified plums or something. So you have to order them online, but they're trying to, the USDA is trying to make this stuff, more and more difficult to get, because unfortunately, cancer is a big, big, big business. And just the final thought on this: when you introduce capitalism capitalism into things like medicine, that to me, that's just a travesty. It's just not the way it should be.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, indeed. They often try to keep you sick to earn money from you as long as possible. I've put the picture of propolis capsules in this hangout, and you can see bee propolis. It's 120 capsules, and it only costs about $20 per jar. So it's cheap and it works very good. It's a natural antibiotica. And
now, is that extracted from honey? So if you ate a lot of natural honey?
Well, real honey contains a bit of it, but this is in the hive, in certain parts of the hive. It's basically where the hive is also made of. Those you can see those hexagonal shapes.
Right.
And in those hexagonal shapes, if there are certain areas a little bit more, you can squash that, and then you got that propolis. And the bee themselves use propolis to cure themselves all kinds of diseases. But it also works on humans, and it's a natural antibiotica. And that's not expensive. This is on Amazon. It's not very expensive. You can check how expensive it is basically on Amazon. But this jar with about 120 capsules is about $20, and that's the expensive one. You can even get them for maybe $15 if you search a bit longer.
Yeah, and antibiotics are definitely they've been great. They do great things, but
this is a natural one.
Natural, right? But on the topic though, doctors prescribe antibiotics for pretty much everything, and
that's the chemical one, and that one does the same thing.
Taking that thing, shouldn't we? They've just taken us to drugs.
Well, they give you the chemical antibiotica, and that kills also a lot of good cells, with just like a chemotherapy. But the propolis rebuilds your immune system. That is what it basically does. It rebuilds and improves your immune system. And I have been using it also for a longer time of period, and I have convinced my dad to use it. And after 2 months, I could see a rapid improvement in his health.
Well, that's good too, because a lot of antibiotics, they actually dampen your immune system. So that's, natural stuff is always going to be better. But, doctors, they prescribe antibiotics for everything. And so what happens over prolonged periods is your immune system doesn't build up. You lose your natural ability to fight off, pathogens and toxins. And also, of course, when you take a lot of antibiotics, in your gut wall, you have lots of different, basically a rainforest of bacteria. And if that goes out of balance, for example, with antibiotics, you get a lot of candidus overgrowth.
Yeah.
And antibiotics can cause major problems if they're overdone. But natural is different for sure.
Yeah, they always give you the chemical one, and never, because propolis, to my knowledge, has been around from the 1970s, so for a long time, and they try to hide it as much as possible. Also, a lot of companies
you can't put a patent on nature. You can only copy it into a chemical formula and patent that and sell on that part, and call actually the original true natural medicine the alternative.
Yeah.
But they are the alternative.
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
They just turn it 180 degree for what it is.
Yeah.
And the chemical one is always the one where what is the patent part. That's why we have food supplements, etc. Just to have a patent on it.
Yep.
Just to have the rights to sell it. And that's the whole here, that the entrepreneurship of the man itself is actually stolen by the company.
Oh yeah.
They have the only right to do this. And that's I figure with the whole free energy stuff the same. As soon as they are going onto the market to sell it to the people, that's the moment they are actually cut out of it.
Yeah, and often of the time, the alternative, so like propolis and other natural remedies for ailments, they call that the alternative. And the chemical ones are often more expensive. The natural ones are, like I said, this pot is, if you research a little bit on the internet, you can get this jar for about $15, and you have 120 capsules. So about $100, you're only $40, and you have almost enough for a whole year. So
it's also
and that's why they put now next year they put in place that the alternative drugs they had a lower tax on them, like 8%, and next year they will become 21%. So they put a higher tax on them. So they try to make those alternative medicine more expensive. So
earn more. This model itself is actually the cancer in society.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the doctor is paid for people who are sick, not for people who are actually healthy. If he was paid by the people who were healthy, then he would actually cause that all the people he has as a customer were healthy, because that earned his money.
Yeah.
But now it's the other way around. He's depending on what he can sell for the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, it really is disgusting, because you look at things like, and there's just tons of very potent medicinal things, and one of them that I'm a very big advocate for is of course pot, marijuana, whatever. People have been using that medicinally for a long time. It grows right out of the ground, God's green earth. But one of the original reasons why they made pot illegal in the United States was DuPont, one of the big DuPont manufacturers. Well, they had just invented nylon and, nylon rope, whatever. And they didn't want to compete with hemp rope because, well, hemp's natural, it's better. And there were a lot of immigrants coming up to America from South America, Mexico, and they were bringing literally boatloads of hemp and marijuana. And so DuPont and the government got together and decided, well, we need to keep we want to have nylon be the rope that everyone buys, and we want to get rid of the alternative, which is hemp. And so what they did was they made it illegal, and that gave the government a reason to arrest South American immigrants for bringing hemp up to the country. And at the same time, it saved DuPont's butt, because nylon would have never made it if we were still using hemp rope and hemp soap and hemp paper and hemp clothes or whatever. And what's very ironic about it is back when the United States was first founded, George Washington, the 9th president, not the first, but during those days, it was actually mandatory that landowners it was mandatory that they grew hemp, because there's so many uses for it. And now it's to the point where they have it scheduled higher, more dangerous, no medical benefits in the United States. It's higher than cocaine and heroin. It's worse than cocaine and heroin. So it's just crazy.
Hemp was also one of the oldest flags you have in America is made of hemp.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Hearst got on the bandwagon as well, because he also, being the owner of like 6 or 7 major newspapers at the time, was very happy to have his paper manufacturing companies be the source of paper as well. So he was happy to support it. In addition to the fact there are several drugs that their derivatives are actually from the cannabis and cannabinoids. So just like everything else, they were happy to make the organic version illegal so that their version would have the market share.
Yeah, absolutely right. And now we've got this huge issue where I forget what it is, but like every 10 seconds they're cutting down some X number of acres of rainforest. The rainforests of South America are sort of dubbed the lungs of the earth.
They're legalizing nature just because it's inconvenient for their business model.
Right. And again, when you marry capitalism to medicine and to production, it's just a recipe for disaster. Yeah.
But that's why we like to actually know and share what the knowledge is, what we miss. Put the truth into the eye of the perceiver, and those who actually are able to confront themselves with it and eat it and think about it.
Well, you have now Jesse Ventura also did a subject about marijuana marijuana pills you can put on your tongue, because his wife, basically why Jesse Ventura had the setup for him to run for president of the United States, but he didn't go on with that because his wife was ill. She had seizures almost every day, and they put her on all kinds of medicine, and it didn't work, and sometimes the medicine made it even worse. And then Jesse Ventura learned more about alternative medicines, and he had hemp pills, and his wife has to take now one hemp pill under the tongue. It's a liquid one, I believe, and then all her seizures were gone after a couple of days. So now she swallows just one hemp capsule a day, and her seizures are all gone, and even her health improved. And now he has a marijuana manifesto on his site to actually make hemp more legalized in more parts in America as a legal drugs to use if you have seizures or other kind of ailments. So I think it's great that now some people have more people watching them are also promoting alternative medicines. So
yeah, and what they're doing is absolutely criminal, honestly, and it's really bad here. I've never left the United States, so I don't know how bad it is other places, but I know it's really bad here. Because there are so many natural things. Even just a good diet can keep you healthy, but in America, it's hard to keep a good diet, really, because everything's so expensive. We import more than we export, and I'm pretty sure that America's number one export is war, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm sorry, but that's just not a productive economy base, right?
No. Well, the war machine is indeed the most expensive thing in America. Trillion of dollars every year are put in the war machine in America, and they don't put it in other kinds of things of actually saving lives or actually helping the poor and get rid of all the poverty on the planet.
But on their flag is a head with two bones. They're the pirates, and as long as it's on the flag, it's legal. So in a way that we say to you, this is what we do. So this is our business. So if you go with us in the business, then you can expect this. This is our flag, and it's legal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's really kind of ironic too, because speaking of the American military-industrial complex, if you look at a pie chart, if I'm not mistaken, like America spends like about half. Like if you look at the whole world's military spending, half of it's like America, right? So you think, oh, well, that must make America better. America has a good army, but they really waste a lot of that money. Like just for an example, maybe this is exaggerating it, but like if you look at one of their invoices, it's like hammer, $55, toilet seat, $500. And so I guess the point is, just because you're spending a lot of money on something doesn't necessarily mean you're getting your money's worth. And of course, the manufacturers like Boeing and all the manufacturers that build the stuff for the military, they make sure that every year their stuff gets more and more expensive, and they know that the government's going to pay for it. And so it's just a big bubble. It's a big scam, basically. And just because you spend more money on the war machine, if you're wasting 90% of it on fattening people's pockets, then doesn't necessarily mean you're that much better.
Yeah, indeed. Great example.
In a way, it's also a bit of a naive thing with the whole politics stuff, that people just, as long as they're not yet a real politician and having the actual vows, then they're actually very natural good for the people. But as soon as they're actually taking their vows, they're actually make a contract with the crown, and the crown is actually the whole UCC principle. And as soon as they're doing that, then as a politician, they end up just doing what the policies are of the corporation. And after that, they're just in the businesses well cared for. You see
Yeah,
how
no, you're absolutely right. It's like, Washington D.C., the District of Columbia, is not part of America. It's a District of Columbia. Go figure. But
Just real quick, I'm going to the toilet and getting something to drink, so I will be back in a moment.
okay.
Thanks for that, artist.
Yeah, and so the capital of the U.S. District of Columbia, it's not part of the country, but what it is, it's basically the corporate headquarters of corporate America, which is, Americans love to think that we've got the best sort of government. We're a democracy. We have a choice, but that's a big myth.
it actually, what was it called? Republic?
Not a democracy.
Yeah.
We're a republic.
Yeah, originally it was a Confederate republic, and the Confederate. I don't know about overseas, but Confederacy has a lot of stigma attached to it. But all it means is against centralized power. And frankly, I wouldn't blame people coming over here and being Confederate, because if you could imagine, unless you're royalty, right? If you could imagine living in a place where if your dad was a blacksmith, you're a blacksmith. The caste system. If your dad was a shoemaker, you're a shoemaker. And if your dad was king, then you're a prince. People wanted to get away from that. And so Confederate is, it's not a bad word. But yeah, the first 7 presidents before Washington were presidents of the Continental Congress under the Articles of Confederation. And, I've said this a few times, but I firmly believe that the Revolutionary War was lost by the good guys, in quotes. And so same thing with the Civil War. But of course, history gives you sort of a convoluted narrative that people eat up. And of course, we grow up with it, so we think it's normal. But at the end of the day, every value, every ideal that people came to America originally to get away from, and just to have sovereignty, to have peace, to have freedom, we're pretty much to the point to where, that doesn't really exist here anymore. I mean, America has way more prisoners per capita.
You're free, but you're not free, because they're channeling everything through the television and making you watch what they want to watch the fake wars, the fake news, the fake everything. Then it's always they're advertising, and then everything's about dying, everything's about falling apart. No one trusts each other, no one likes each other. It just goes on, and this is what they're doing. It's a form of communism, because they're just it is. It's subversion.
Yeah. There's definitely communist aspects to American government, but really what it is, and if you guys are familiar with Chris Hedges, I love the term that he used. It's inverted fascism, whereas like regular fascism would be where the government is sort of over the corporations, and that's who runs everything. Whereas here, the corporations really sort of own the government, and they work in conjunction, and that's absolutely not the way that it should be.
What they did was, say somewhere like Russia, they took everything away from everybody there. Whereas what they've done is we've got debt instead. That's what controls us, is the debt, the money.
Yeah.
So they've just done it a different way, but they've done the same things. So it's still broken up the families. You're not wearing proper shoes, you're wearing plastic. You don't get the negative ions. You don't go in the sun. The sun's good for you. We're slapping factor 50 on our children with chemicals in. It just goes on. So we're just being controlled in a different way.
Right. Yeah. Because, these call them the Illuminati, call them whatever you will, the royal bloodlines, the Illuminati bloodlines. They've been controlling societies for a long, long time. They've got methods, but they realized at some point that it's a lot easier to control people rather than like whips and chains, control them psychologically. Because if you control people with whips and chains, eventually they're going to rebel and overthrow that government, and your head ends up on a pike. And so what they figured out.
We don't know any of our past. They've completely lied about everything.
Right.
Covered it all up. Haven't told us the truth about the pyramids.
Is to be the parent of the child of the citizens, to protect them from the chaos, because the citizens is actually the always kind of the cattle what is dependent on the state. That's how they treat you. That's how they present you. That's how they train you to think. Not even realizing it's from childhood. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're kept stupid. You're not stupid. You're kept stupid.
That's right.
You don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. People are
I mean,
very.
Angel, what does it make you feel like when you realise that everything's a lie? The whole thing's a lie. Is it exciting for you?
It was quite interesting. It was a lot easier for me to believe certain things. Like, I'll give you a great example. When I was first asked, Anthony asked me a simple question, like, because I was working on reverse engineering the entire plateau, and I was sitting there talking with them, and I was saying, well, over the area of the entire plateau, we're going to have about 10 to 12 inches of play because of the rotation of the curvature of the Earth. And he said, are you sure about that? And if it wasn't for everything else and my view on 9/11 and all the other stuff, I would have thought he was a crazy loon and not giving him any more time of day. But I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he started talking to me about, what I had never in my 40 plus years of life considered, is that perhaps the Earth wasn't as round as I was given the impression it was. And after a while, I'm it didn't take much longer than a month or two to realize that most everything I knew, one piece at a time. I mean, I'm not benign to things like Operation Echelon and our Operation Prism and, High Jump, of course, at this point, and a couple of other things. It's like I've seen the documentation of what our government has done and what can be done, and the monkey farms that we did with blinking lights and vivisection and MK Naomi and MK Ultra and all the other stuff where we played with people, and how LSD actually came from the acid that's on the back of frogs, because we wanted to play with that. And everything was all, how can we manipulate this? Usually for not good governmental reasons, but it was a lot easier to understand and open your mind to question it kind of is George Carlin. Question every, I accept but verify. So and if it wasn't for 1, 2, 3 things that I'd already seen, I'd been involved being out here in LA in things where I was physically involved in it, but yet the news reported something completely different. And I'm like, well, that's a complete bloody lie. And as more and more came to be, I got rid of my TV 2 decades ago, just about. It was like 2001, just before they went to digital stuff. And it really bothered me that they went to digital stuff, because one of the things I was planning on doing was setting up a pirate TV show. And luckily, because of the internet, this kind of is a pirate TV show, zero cost factor. But with going to digital, it made the ability to set up a pirate TV show like completely off the, out of the budget. But it's a lot easier once you see one lie after another to question everything, trust but verify. And I gave up blindly following what I'm told, because most often you're just told something to appease you as opposed to being told the truth, either for your protection or because the truth would confuse you or whatever it is. I'm like, I don't care if it confuses. Explain it a little bit more.
I got
indeed. Well, back in the day.
I took notes, so I'll hold. Go ahead, brother.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I don't know if you ever saw that. You had MTV, and when I was a teenager, of course, you watched that program because it was new, and it was the first time you could actually see music clips on TV. But it was I was into hip hop back in the day in the 80s, because it was just starting, and they had one camera angle with Dr. Dre and Ed Lover, and I was a little bit pissed because when the hip hop section began, after about 50 minutes, a pirate TV station blocked it out completely. And and I was watching the pirate TV station because they blocked out my favorite program. So I was almost pushed to watch it because, well, how long does it take before they get them off the air? Well, most of the time they had about half an hour of free space to show things, and they already showed the movie They Live. It was also very nice that they showed that almost the
Awesome
whole movie.
Classic. Yeah,
that was the first time in 1988 that I saw that movie, because a pirate station was blocking out MTV, and they showed that movie. And after that movie, basically it solidified. I always was skeptic of the media and always was skeptic a bit about the government. But that movie made me see that basically it resonated with me so much that I was thinking, like, if a movie maker makes this type of a movie, it solidifies the way of thinking that I'm thinking now. And it proves that for me it was almost like a proof that I was on the right track. So I was very glad that back in 1988, late 88, that the pirate station was blocking out MTV and giving some of the great information about the world. And they also also had those type of movies showing that the mistreatment of animals, and that the animals were put in small cages, and were the ridiculous kind of ways they treat animals. They also put that on the program. So that was for me the first thing that I was starting to think, well, the government and everybody is lying to us. And now finally, a pirate programming is showing us what it really is going.
Yeah, definitely. And, They Live was a great movie. And, you can look at it two ways. You can look at it like David Icke style, right? Oh, they're reptilians or whatever. And that's, whatever. But you can also look at it allegorically. And, it really makes a lot of sense that there's a lot of people out there that just don't seem to be human because they don't have empathy, most of our leaders. And it's a great movie, great allegorically, and, possibly somewhat true. But backing up to the gentleman that was speaking before, you said you're an engineer?
No. What I'm saying is my goal is to reverse engineer the structure. And you could say in that nature, I am an engineer because I am only trying to apply the laws of physics and known things. I'm not trying to come up with superstitial things and needing of magic arts and golden capstones or anything else, because the structure itself kind of, is self-explanatory when you look at it as a complete system. And a lot of the marks make sense when you look at it, at least if my vision is correct, that many of the marks make sense. But I did start with Chris Dunn, and I watched his lectures and did his things. And then I worked with, if you've watched or know of Chris, you know of John Cadman, and I looked at his idea. And the problem with his idea is that they all require pieces and parts that don't physically exist in the structure. So I said, well, let's look at what does exist in the structure. And it's kind of like when you look at Newtown, Sandy Hook, hey, this is what we were told, but this is what the pictures show. This is what the video we were showed, but this is what the school looks like. And that video is from a different school on a different day. It's just, again, you just got to put all the pieces together and Occam's razor, let all the pieces fall into place, exclude out what is a lie, and what's left is what's left. And I think the structure itself is pretty amazing. I'd like to recreate something like the same way, either a tabletop set, something like a Lord Kelvin generator type size, and or something physically that large and see what it can really do. But again, I'd like to try it in CAD first. And I've been playing with SketchUp, but the problem with SketchUp is it doesn't have what's called an Earth engine. So I can't actually put things in motion. And, that's where I kind of hit some brick walls here. But my goal is to take the structure, physically build something as close to it as possible, both in dimensions and proportions, and see what happens. Because I do think it will work as it sits, kind of like, if I showed you a Bunsen burner, was the example I was given earlier, and I said, this is a Bunsen burner, and somebody says, no, it's not. You can prove it one way or the other. But if I set the right variables and I show you what it's doing, and you say, wow, it does work exactly as it is, perfectly as it sets, it'll just show the level of technology that these guys had. And I hope it will be pretty black and white, kind of. But again, like I was saying, there are all these people going to go out there and say, oh, that's a complete coincidence. Well, that's great. Could be a complete coincidence or not, but it works, and thank you.
Right. Yeah. And the reason I ask is because, logically, if you're trying to build something flat that covers a long distance, your natural intuition would say, well, let's deal with the curvature, right? But if you've never read Zetetic Astronomy, which is really is a must read, and it has its issues. I don't agree with all of it, but that is a damn good book from 1865, and it's all about flat Earth. And one of the things that was documented in there was that there were engineers, over in England and Europe and stuff, that they would try to factor in the curvature of the Earth to build, bridges, canals, whatever, buildings, and they would end in catastrophe. And so they literally Parliament had to pass laws for engineers that they would consider the ground completely level at all distances. So they made it illegal for engineers to use the curvature of the Earth in their designs. So that should tell you something. Now, just backing up a little bit, because I took some notes on what Siri was saying. One of the things is or maybe it was you, but somebody mentioned that like you witnessed something happen, right? And then the news reports are completely different. Well, some people, and I just can't believe this, but some people will they'll be there when an event happens and witness it, but then they'll wait for the news to tell them the story of what happened. And like you'll see like reporters interviewing witnesses to whatever, and they'll say, well, I saw on the news that this happened. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought you were a witness. So you're right. I mean, it's really crazy the amount of and mind control sounds like a very it's like over the top, but in all honesty, mind control is a pretty good way to put it, especially with the advent of TV.
I've witnessed cognitive dissonance. I believe that's what it would be firsthand. On a 9/11 subject, I started with I'll say my subject about 5 years ago, maybe 7. It was after I learned about with Loose Change 2007. So it was a decade ago, and it was like 3 or 4 years after that. I was showing my friend. I sat down in my house, and we were watching at because he had mentioned he went to Las Vegas and saw the sands be blown up. And I said, great. And I pulled up the video of the building that rolls over. I pulled up a video of the Traverse where they blow it from the middle and have it squish. I pulled up all videos of exploding things. Then I showed him a couple of Building 7. I said, isn't that one great? Look how uniform that is. He says, oh, yeah, I love watch build. I'm like, did you know that happened on September 11th? He's like, what? I'm like, that didn't happen on September. I would have known about this. Well, you're making it up. I showed him the picture, the top piece where you see where the air conditioners and stuff are. And I said, look, you can see it in the foreground behind Jane here, who's saying that building is going to blow up in about 25 minutes. See that? That's that building. Here it is. See the video? He's like, oh, that is. And he's like, you're lying. So we actually, for about 3-4 months, didn't talk because he thought I was trying to give him a line of malarkey. Then a couple of years later, I'm working with him, and he's like, okay, maybe it did blow up. And I'm like, okay, this is great. He's like, then he's trying to justify it with everything other than the fact that the other two, if one was a controlled demolition, then the other two also could be. And then he got onto the whole, it was done by fire, because he read a thing online that it was done by fire. And I'm like, okay, don't ever use my frying pan again. I don't want my house blowing up. He's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, because, this is your logic. And then we went into the whole thing. I'm like, metal doesn't, burn from office fires. He's like, well, it must have. We can see it on TV. I'm like, no, you see a building falling down. You don't see a building. Oh, that's the other thing he says. But it was engulfed in flames. I'm like, you show me the picture of it engulfed in flames. I can show you pictures of some flames on a few floors. This is not engulfed in flames. Here, let me show you the Windsor building. This is engulfed in flames. And
don't you know that every time you cook out on a grill, you have to buy a new grill because metal melts very low temperatures, of course.
Right. So it's just this person who I was working with, and we actually currently aren't talking because it just got to the point where I'm like, you are just cognitive dissonance. He saw it on TV. Whatever I say, even though I'm working with logic, can't be right because he saw and heard something else from officials. Therefore, the officials are right and logic is wrong. And it's the same thing with the flat earth. But you know what? I point out things like, but I'm like, but what?
Yeah, it's so right. Like one thing that I've been doing the last couple of weeks that I really hadn't done much is meet new people and just, hey, let me talk to you for a minute and start talking about flat Earth. And if you can prove no curvature and you can prove no motion of the Earth, the heliocentric model's finished. But of course, what people do, like, well, the moon's round, and what about the stars? It's like, what does that have to do with anything at all? And I've asked people, what is the number one reason you believe the Earth is a spinning sphere? And it is because they saw it on TV. But it's like, okay, so do you believe that Superman flies around in the air and but it was on the news. Oh, it was on the news, right? Well, all the news really is just a propaganda mouthpiece for the government.
Well, in CNN also was caught interviewing their own cameraman when those riots against Trump were in America. CNN had a video, it's all over the internet, that they are interviewing somebody, and his acting is so horrible that the one still at CNN, the headquarters, tells, well, that's our cameraman. And then they start grinning, oh yeah, he's our cameraman, and like it was a joke or some sort. But at the beginning, they tried to portray him as an angry citizen who was protesting against that Trump was put in office. But it was basically their old cameraman they were interviewing. So they proved themselves wrong that they interviewed their own old employees on the TV. And for series, I have another video. It's a video about someone. He has an old atlas from 1988, and in that atlas there was a picture of the. They stated in the atlas that the picture was of taken by a satellite of the world high up, and he compared it actually to the globe model. And on that picture, you can see more land, and it is even cut off in a circle. That's very strange, but you can see more land as you could actually see on a globe when you put up a satellite at that altitude. So NASA disproved themselves in showing a picture in an old atlas that was supposedly taken by a satellite of Earth, and you can see more land as you could possibly see. And also in that picture you could see that the Earth was very flat. You couldn't see any curvature, and they cut it off, so you can clearly see in that video that NASA disproves themselves. Yeah, if you could play that, it's an awesome video. It disproves NASA completely, 100%. That they disprove themselves in one picture. It proves that the Earth is flat, and they put it in a book in 1988 in an atlas.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
sure
so,
if Siri.
that's so funny. Yeah, if someone can find that, I'd love to see it. And it's funny because NASA.
I put it in the Hangout, and maybe I can play it, but then it's without any. Oh, he has already found it. It's a great video.
Okay. And yeah, NASA disproves themselves all the time. I mean, like, for example, we'll look at this first and I'll put a note or I'll forget. But yeah, that's cool. I'll watch this. Hold on. Muting. Arr.
You have to play it with sound, series.
Yeah.
Revised edition 1989. So on this picture says this is a satellite view of Earth. So you can see this. This is a satellite view of Earth. As you can see South America right here. Very interesting. And they cut it like this too. So square pictures were usually for everything. I've never seen a round picture like this taken from a camera. So this was obviously cropped or cut. They can make it circle where the equator is supposed to be. My point in here is that when you look at this globe here, see right here is Central America, right there. Right? Central America, same thing, right there. Now we look down on a round globe. Central America is way over here. So if you look at the picture like that, you can't see Central America. It's on the equator. If you're taking a picture like this, you're not going to be able to see Central America right there. There's South America. You can't see that at all. It's around the globe. You're looking down like this, complete opposite side of the equator. And that, look at, they cut it right there because they knew that it was the equator. And you can see it. Go flat, it looks flat. No curvature, no angle, just perfect flat. Everything looks flat. Go flat. So it's right here. There's Africa. Right here. There. The equator is right here. And if you look down on it, you can't see from this angle. But in this picture, satellite photo, you can see it. 1989. So I'm saying, do your research, look in books, find stuff. Most importantly, to everybody, do your research.
Well, you can enter the video now.
Someone said something you don't know. It's okay.
Well, this basically proves that the Earth is a globe, because NASA shows you a picture that is taken by a satellite, and it's not a composite photo. It's an actually whole satellite picture of Earth, and if you can see more land that you could actually see from that high up. So they disproved themselves in a picture in a book from 1988 or 89.
I bet you still can.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say, it doesn't necessarily prove flat Earth, but what it definitely proves is that NASA's completely full of it. That's for sure, right?
Well, it proves that this picture couldn't be taken on a round Earth.
Yeah.
It proves that they can't pick a truth and stick with it.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very great, but they even cut it off in a circle, so probably it was even larger. So there was even more land on that picture, and you can't see that from that point of view down to Earth. So they disprove their whole globe model in that picture only.
Yeah,
so
it could be a painting too. And actually, I lied. I had seen that before.
Yeah, that could be a painting. But NASA states, and maybe it's a painting, maybe it's fake, it's a composite. But NASA says in this book that it's 100% a satellite view of Earth, and it's not a composite. It's one picture of satellite from a satellite to Earth. But it can't be in their theory. It can't be because you can see more land actually than it's possible. So they disprove themselves with the Earth being a globe.
Well, and another
That's
funny.
funny.
You're absolutely right. And here's another funny part of this too. With this picture, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's a picture. I think it's probably a painting, but I guess NASA is trying to tell everyone that the sky isn't blue as well, right?
Yeah.
Where's the blue sky?
Nowhere.
Because
So
you can't see space from the ground during the day. So yeah, I guess the sky isn't blue because NASA said so.
Yeah, but what is indeed, and what is funny is that in this video NASA disproves themselves. So if let's say this picture is true, there isn't a globe, because if you have a globe you can't take this picture.
But they can't go that high up, can they, to take the pictures?
Probably they can't go high up, but it's just so funny that NASA puts out pictures that you can't actually take in their model. If you stay with their model, and I know it's not true, it's all a bunch of baloney that they put out NASA, and it costs us a lot of money. And but they actually are disproving themselves with all kinds of pictures, and that's sometimes I think that's very funny, and also proves that they are lying.
Well, there's so many other things too that NASA does, and I'll be quick. I heard someone else trying to speak. I don't know who it was, but just two quick examples. They claim that geostationary satellites are some 20,000 miles up, and frankly, radio frequency transmissions just cannot propagate that far. They fizzle out or attenuate into the background radiation, and it's not doable. And then the second example would be the ISS, visible with the naked eye. That's impossible. It should not be visible. And so NASA does a great job of putting out information that contradicts itself, but people are so brainwashed or mind controlled into the heliocentric theory that they will never second guess it. It's crazy.
Yeah, even you can see that's why I always look at old books and old newspapers, because I showed a couple of hangouts ago, and I also saw the newspaper. It's in I don't know what that site is called anymore, but it's basically an old newspaper site, and you can see old articles. And there was also an article, I think it was 1800s, and then a teacher was basically kicked off of school because he was teaching a globe model. So a lot of schools even had a flat Earth model back in the 70s, 80s. It's longer that the globe model is used, but the newspaper tells a whole different story. So again, it's the old books disproves the history they are telling on the news and in shows.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because they've been lying.
I always encourage everybody to read old books and do a lot of research, because you stumble on many things that disproves the theories nowadays.
Well, if an entity or a person or a government agency is always lying, it's going to come a time where they contradict themselves, because as long as you tell the truth, you don't have to, piece together stories. But like
the whole hangout froze for a second.
Oh, well, I was just saying that, if an entity or a person or a government agency just constantly lies, like NASA, then, they're eventually going to contradict themselves. And, if you always tell the truth, then you don't have to remember your lies and put together stories. But I'm getting a lot of feedback for some reason. But,
yeah, that's probably serious. Yeah.
Okay, so just one example, and I'm still getting it.
Hang on, let me just.
There we go. That was it.
Let me.
No, it's perfect. Fairly recently, I put out a video, and a few other people did too, where astronauts are being interviewed. Lots of different astronauts, starting with the Apollo crew that just got back from the moon, in air quotes, all the way up to today. And different people are asking them, so what's it look like up in space? Are there lots of stars or what? And half of them say, oh yeah, the stars are so much brighter. The sky is full of stars you've never seen. It's brilliant with stars. And then the other half of the astronauts will say, oh no, you can't see any stars out there. The sky is like a black velvet. I don't see any stars. So, that right there, that's circumstantial, but it shows that, if an entity or a group of people or whatever are lying, then they're going to contradict themselves. And I think NASA has done this so many times, but again, they know that they can get away with it because it really takes a lot for a person to come to realize the truth, to the point to where you can sit down and prove flat Earth to somebody, and they're going to laugh at you and think you're crazy and stupid. They've really done a good job at this, I'll tell you. I mean, they're evil bastards, excuse the language, but they do get an A for effort at least.
Well, they count on it that most of the people don't do their research or remember years
They
ago.
don't seem to care, do they? You tell
They don't
people
care
that what
because,
NASA and they don't care.
There's sometimes those accidents at sea that an oil tanker cracks in half and a lot of oil is spilled. Well, most of the time it's only that report, and you don't see anything later on where the oil is going, if it's came ashore on a country or not. But what I researched that a little bit. I thought, well, a lot of oil tankers were broken in half. The oil was spilled. Where did it go? I did a lot of research, and in the Gulf of Mexico, most of the time all the oil goes in there because the hurricanes always also go in that direction. So a lot of spillage on the sea also goes in that direction. And I saw some videos that actually in a part of the sea there, you can't even swim anymore, because if you go in for a couple of minutes, you got burns and all kinds of skin things. Your skin basically falls off. Sorry.
That's from the correctant. It's a chemical they mixed with the oil to make it sink below the water level, so it looked like the spill went away.
Oh yeah, well, thanks, man, for that. But in the Gulf of Mexico, a lot of beaches, you can't even go in the water because your skin will peel off.
Yeah, and that brings up another really good point. And I guess this pyramid show is a little bit about flat Earth too, right? But all these oil spills and their strip mining, the beautiful mountain ranges like in Virginia, and fracking, and just unit pollutants, just everything. And after all this time with our technology, like really, why aren't we mining Antarctica? Because that's the ideal place to get all that stuff, where we're not, say, decimating the fishing enterprises. The entire Gulf of Mexico couldn't fish there for years. I'm not sure if they even can today. I don't know, but it was years.
Yeah.
So this whole excuse about the Antarctic Treaty that's so antiquated, like I'm pretty sure that everybody that signed that thing originally is dead. You would think that our politicians or our people would be smart enough to say, well, we can't keep polluting our own backyard. Why don't we just go mine Antarctica? It'll be a little bit more expensive to ship it, but I'm sorry. Like I remember, I've bought this is a silly example, but I've bought a webcam for $1 online, but it cost me $25 to ship it from Japan.
Yeah.
And so, it's the same sort of thing, with Antarctica. What price can you put on the health of our people, the stability of our ecosystems? It's priceless. There is no price for that. But, I obviously, as flat earthers, we know that there's probably something down in Antarctica, whatever model you subscribe to, that they don't want us finding out. And, people just don't think about it.
Well, that's maybe the problem. If you send a lot of workers over there to mine all kinds of things, the chance of the people who are working at Antarctica to extract the minerals and all types of things, they probably you get a higher chance of people finding out what is actually there. So they try to send as less people over there as possible.
Yeah, that does make some degree of sense, but honestly, I think that it would have to be a concerted, funded, massive effort to really get a good feel about what's going on in both poles, in any model. And I just don't think, you can send a few hundred people down to a job site, and it's not like they're going to go circumnavigate, Antarctica. They're going to pretty much stay put, just like all the other people that travel there do. But, I have a hunch that the big corporations are already down there mining. They'll just never tell us.
Oh yeah, that's a huge possibility.
Well, I wasn't sure whether they wanted to keep you thinking about Antarctica when really it's the North they don't want you thinking about, so they keep you interested in Antarctica.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it could be.
Put up a big distraction to hide something else.
Yeah.
Well, I figured through the elevation and how they actually treat the photographic data, they just pull it all out of the square data and put it in everything else possible. But translating it back into the square, you can't produce the same data anymore. You lose everything. You lose all the sharpness of Morgile. We just simply work out of the idea of the ball where we started with, never realizing what the actual data was. And they show it right in our face when we actually see our empirical detail of our own environment and can actually confirm that there is the actual photographic correct presentation of your own empirical environment. You can make sure for yourself. Out of that, I only get the square. If you put all the data together, you get just a simple square. And so far, they only give you the photographic data up to the latitude 85. Beyond there, you get the complete square beyond it for only the 5 degrees. And that's how that works through their GPS translation into the XY grid, what is used for the photograph. And based on the XY grid, they actually calculate distances. The only way to actually calculate this, that only based on how the equator size is a fixed distance.
The guy on the video said something as well. He said that all the pictures would be square, so why are we looking at a circle?
Yeah, that's also that's what the guy in the video pointed out. That it's very strange. All the pictures in that book were square, and back in that time you couldn't probably take a kind of sharp picture with a sharp edge like that. So they cropped the image to make it look round.
This is just an EA cutout from the equator. Yeah. Latitude 0 is actually at the edge under Africa. No, exactly.
I really have to stress that it's got to be a composite because, number one, this would be a satellite that would be over the North Pole. Yeah. Number two, if it was real, I believe that
they stated that it was real, but yeah.
Well, I believe that's what they stated.
Yeah.
But the land further away, I believe you would get more of a parallax type of a result, just like kind of when you look down upon the globe image that they were showing.
Yeah.
Even in real life, you would get that, the thing, because you would be even if it was a globe, you would be physically closer to the stuff immediately beneath you than you are to the stuff that's thousands of miles or hundreds of miles out further. Because wherever you are, especially if it's a globe, it would be amplified because as you go out further, it's actually going 8 inches per mile squared further away from you. But if it's flat, it's further away from you anyway. So no matter what, this is composite. But the fact that they messed up and didn't stop it at the equator was kind of probably they're like, hey, let's see what we can do. And somebody didn't stop to think about, hey, we got to stick with the can't go past the equator vision bit. Yeah. But I cannot perceive this to be actually a real photo.
Oh,
you can't tell me that.
It is probably not a real photo, and it's a composite of many photos. But I found it funny that they disproved themselves.
Yeah, that is the part where they, like I said, they can't stay consistent on their facts. That's what John was pointing out. When you lie so much, you gotta, your lies keep catching up on you.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and a good analogy I like to use is like Santa Claus, right? Like, obviously that's a lie. So Santa Claus will never be proven true, right? But once you disprove the phenomenon of Santa Claus, whether it's this image here, that proves that NASA is completely full of it at least. Another big one, the full moon during the day. If you've ever seen the full moon during the day, well, you've just totally debunked the heliocentric model. Same thing goes with, say, a 3% crescent moon at night. Neither one of those optical observations that we've all seen, neither one of those are compatible with the heliocentric model. And so, you can keep going on with disproofs and disproofs, but once you've disproven Santa Claus, you don't also have to go on and disprove Mrs. Claus and the little elves that build the toys, and you don't have to disprove that he lives at the North Pole. You don't have to disprove the reindeer, and you certainly don't don't have to disprove Rudolph or his little red nose.
Compatible with the heel.
So sorry. Carry on. Sorry.
No, that was it. I love the analogy because that's how globelings act. It's like, okay, the Earth demonstrably has no curvature, and that's geometry, and the Earth demonstrably isn't in motion. That's basic physics. So, what more do you want? Oh, you need a model. You need, what about NASA? Why is the moon round? All of that stuff is just absolutely irrelevant. It is irrelevant because without curvature and without motion, the globe Earth model, it's a joke. It's a complete joke. And it really, guys, we all know, but that's why they get us with that when we're very young, because frankly, I bought into the Tooth Fairy. I bought into Santa Claus when I was very young, but that's because when you're young, you don't have the critical thinking skills, logical skills, and you're going to listen to adults and take what they say to be true. And so that's why, kindergarten, they start you right then in kindergarten, and it seems like they've been doing that for a few hundred years at least. And it's funny because a lot of globe heads say, oh, people have known the Earth was flat for thousands of years. It's like, really? Well, why was the first globe made in the 1500s? It's just so many different things that don't add up with the whole narrative. But proving it isn't the problem. You can prove this all day, but it's up to the individual to think critically, put down their preconceived notions, and just humor the possibility. And then they're on their own path. But you'll never convince someone of this. They have to do it themselves.
And that's why you also have to take pictures. Took 7 years ago, and you can clearly see that the clouds are lit up from the bottom. And that doesn't work at the globe model.
Well, that's a good one. Yeah, I was you guys,
and I have another one that is even more astonishing because you can actually see the. I have to do that again. Sorry. You can actually see the. For miles away, you can see a web spun over the Earth.
What? Can you say what?
A web. Okay, if you see this picture, you can see lower clouds in the distance that are not lit up in any way. And those clouds above them, they're normal clouds, they all have a line through them. And those lines, sadly enough, I lost the video.
Many artists will have caught those kind of photographs, but this was a few years ago when you took this. But
this was almost 17 years ago.
Yeah, Hart was still there, I should think then. It's in the 80s.
Yeah, so you can see almost. And I was just shared this photo. You can see that the lower clouds are not lit up as the rest of the clouds. They're just normal clouds. And the clouds a little bit higher up are all lit up from the bottom. And in a pattern, the distances between those lines are the same. And it goes on forever. I made a video about it, but I lost it because the computer broke down. But I still had this with all kinds of lines in the sky. In this picture, you can see very clear. So if anybody on this, let me to hear this.
We're breaking up a little bit, artist.
Okay. If anybody has a take on this picture, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, harp. It's like harp clouds.
I'm terribly sorry, but yeah, you were breaking up a bit. I'm looking at the picture, but I didn't really get the gist of what you were saying because you were popping in and out there.
Well, what I was saying, you can hear me now clearer, that those lines in the skies were going on forever. And I also made a video. I lost that video because my computer broke down back then. And luckily, I still had that picture on my camera. And you can see that the lines in the clouds are going on till forever. And those lower clouds in the distance are not affected by the structure of the line. And I was just asking this panel if they have any things to add on this picture or their intake or
I agree with a harp-like thing. That would be like symmetric if you look at the clouds, which stay at one usually elevation, as like sand on a dish, and what harp does, or things like harp, there are about 11 plus of them. They just vibrate the atmosphere so that nice little patterns like that show up.
Yeah, but I just wanted to share this picture with everybody, so everybody has a real picture of actually you can see it.
Now, did you happen to note anything before or after, like weird rains or weird dry spell or weird earthquakes or things out of place?
The only thing, I'm a little bit sensitive to vibrations and sounds, as I probably told a couple of hangouts ago. I can also hear frequencies very good of all kinds of. I also often hear the frequencies of human beings, and I hear frequencies of plants. I hear frequencies of animals because they basically all have a different frequency. Every human has a different frequency. Just it looks a little bit the same. It feels a little bit the same. I have to say, but it's all a little bit different. The plants have different frequency. And before this what was in the sky, I could feel a high pitched frequency, like a very high nose that almost was like a dog whistle.
Like you were standing too close to a radio tram.
Yeah, like a microphone resonation. That is very high. If you put a magnet too close to a microphone, you get that high pitched feedback, like.
I'd like to interject before I forget. There's the same way that you can hear things at off the normal scale frequencies. There's a lady, Dr. Sherry Rogers. Actually, she's not a doctor, just a lady. Sound Health Healing. Sound Health Healing. That's it. SoundHealthHealing.com. And she works on honing those abilities, and she actually does it using a microphone because the microphones can hear at higher frequencies. And not only that, but if you look into some of her stuff, you can see how you can help that to hear frequencies, like in people's voices. Every chemical in your body resonates as it goes through your vocal cord, and you can pick out good and bad sound, and you can hear who might be deficient on what. It's just learning how to hone that ability, and/or since you're familiar with it, you experience it real life. Yeah. She has a computer program called Nano Voice that is free on her website that utilizes that technology that everything has frequencies. Everything has frequencies is just all I can say. But that's those clouds are pretty, I feel, evident of symmetric. It's basically the clouds are water, and it would do the same thing. If you took a dish pan of water and you put it on top of a speaker, you play certain frequencies, it makes certain patterns. And
even with scent, they did it and play different frequency. You could see the scent shaped in all kinds of ways.
That's what I was saying a couple of things ago, that I believe.
You guys, I've got a few pictures going series now. They're of clouds that have been around me. They're just going.
Okay.
And they're the same thing like artists. They're just different patterns.
Right. And I believe the whole bit about the spoken word and the way that we've changed our language and gotten away from things, and we keep translating things differently, is such that back in the day, the spoken word was a physical representation of the patterns that the sounds would make, I believe, in silica or sand.
Yep.
And that was the spoken word. And that's the reason why the older languages are chanted, because you're saying it in the exact frequencies of what was at the time, and that was the spoken word. And we manipulate that, and that also goes back to how the original Torah bit, it has a pattern and a rhythm to it, just like a poem. And when a word is out of place, you know it because it doesn't rhyme anymore. And because we manipulate our language and we don't pay attention, we don't even, you could ask a whole question with 4 letters. How are you doing? Or how are you today? Or or are you okay? That's it. Out of 4 letters, you can ask a whole sentence because of how we've manipulated things. And we say things like thou shall not kill, shall not murder, shall not, we just keep throwing different words in there as opposed to sticking with one thing. And it's like the 10 Commandments. There are 4 versions of the 10 Commandments that I know of. Which one is right?
Hang on a sec. Series, I sent you 4 pictures.
Also Ezekiel in the Bible. There are also a lot of versions of Ezekiel in the Bible. Yeah, they're all different.
Yeah, it is. I do believe that our what we are taught in religion, I could go on to how, you guys should know it. In the 1500s, we decided to change the calendar. We decided to change the world to being round. We decided to make religious sun day, worshiping the sun. Our calendar is based on the sun. Everything happened in the 1500s or thereabouts. That's kind of when they stuck that dagger in there and started twisting it. And since then, all that stuff, that lie, the whole, 440, 432, that came in the 1800s when they got into that. And it also has to do with symmetrics, has to do with here's the other bit. If you're sitting there chanting your Torah and you're doing it at 440 base, not 432 base, you're not going to get the same pattern. So it's the whole thing with the whole Tesla stuff. You've skewed the environment. So when you don't get get the right result, you say, oh, it's poppycock. But if you actually do it in the right thing, do it at 432, do it in the right media, silicon, I believe it, or sand, and you.
What, like that, Angel, like that picture she was just showing you? Look at those things. You can't tell me that's natural.
That is,
Yeah, and I guess you were speaking of the Hebrew alphabet when it's spoken at the right tone. When you put it through, I guess, some sort of a modulator, cymatic modulator, whatever, it'll whatever character that you're speaking at the right tone the sound frequency forms the letter in that cymatic modulator, whatever. And that's really interesting because that's a relatively new discovery. But if you've ever read or listened to the audiobook Iron Republic, that's something. It was written in 1902, and they had brought that up in the Iron Republic as well, long before this was ever discovered. And the people that allegedly live in the Iron Republic use the Hebrew alphabet because it is, how perfect is that? Like, what are the odds of that happening by coincidence, right?
Right. But here's the thing. If you have taken from the 1800s and you've skewed what our A is, our start base, from 432 to 440, then if you test this theory, that you will get null result because we're not working in the right medium, the 432. They've messed with the music. They did that in the 1800s. They messed with it. They've really, just like the guy from the CIA said, when everything the American public knows is wrong, our job will be complete. They've completely taken us away from, I'd have to say it, the Bible. Not that really, I wasn't a Bible pushing person a long time, but the original Bible. I think it was really a message of true knowledge, and they're trying to do everything they can to skew that information, skew it by sound, skew it by the date. We celebrate exactly what it says not to do. We worship on Sunday. In fact, it was just 2-3 months ago, there was a court case where the Rome, the Pope dude, they admitted that, well, yeah, Sunday is our day. And if you celebrate on Sunday, technically you're celebrating our day. So you should tithe to us. Prior to that, it was Saturday, the Sabbath day. Let there be sun was the first day. I mean, we everything is a lie practically, other than if I throw a rock up, it goes up, and it falls, it goes down. That's the only thing that can really be true.
Yeah. If you have calendars here in Germany, always have a week, and it starts with Sunday, Monday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Friday,
That's
Saturday.
Because Saturday is the seventh day.
Because Saturday is the seventh day, and they try to portray that Sunday is the seventh day, but in all the calendars, most of them, Sunday is the first day. So
that isn't right then.
All calendars here in Germany start Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
It goes back to, I don't know, I don't think it was Globebusters, but on one of the channels of people who think, they pointed out that all of our months, everything is all based, you can practically back it, and you can see where in time we threw a month in and did this and did that.
Oh, yeah.
But if you have to go backwards to see what you're working with. Otherwise, really, if somebody gives you a time and a date, it doesn't matter because we're not working on the same calendar. The only true way to do it, and this is where I have to direct people to the Coral Castle, is by saying, when this planet is in that location in the sky, when this planet is at that location in the sky, and this planet is at that location in the sky, that is the time and date I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And you can really only do that with the whole celestial navigation bit, which I think we completely have also gotten away from, because then it would be harder to prove the whole globe theory when people realize that when you're doing celestial navigation using a sextant or something simple like that it's all based on a flat Earth.
Yeah.
Flat horizon, the whole astrology. You have the horizon.
Sorry, I didn't even realize I was on mute. Sorry, guys. Everything's definitely based on a flat Earth because that it is what it is. I mean, the globe Earth thing is just theoretical, and some things worth mathematically, but you just can't make a lie true. And it's again, I don't understand how this has lasted so long. Well, I mean, I do, because they get us when we're young. But like I said earlier, you can literally show somebody evidence of all this and they won't believe you. But there's just so many amazing things, natural amazing things, like we're talking about cymatics and this and that. And it really jives well with flat Earth, because a spinning ball Earth just doesn't have the stability and balance I don't think that a flat stationary dielectric plane would. So I'm just glad more and more smart people like you guys that are way smarter than me are talking about this now, because makes my life a whole lot easier.
I have some pictures for.
Yeah, that's Coral Castle. I could tell that in the dark.
Yep.
You can see Saturn, you can see the moon, you can see the sun, all kinds of.
There's a gentleman, JRLL Polk or something like that. He has a video website where he goes through how to read that. And it's all astrological signs. And when you sit at the right spot, you can see, like there to the left, you can see a hole. If you're sitting in the right spot and there's a hole and it says basically the astrological sign you're sitting in, when that is within that hole, that is the time. And it's the same thing throughout the whole thing. It's a time and date. It's probably his wife's birthday or something like that. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm not really too into astronomy. That would be something I would ask that dude over in Spain that did the whole pendulum, or the how long the shadow was on equinox day. Tuberats, whatever. He could probably whip up exactly what day it is. I don't know. But I do understand the math behind it. And it is not only that, but this gentleman, Leet Scallon, also was very into the Enigma machine, which goes into cryptography. And I love cryptography as well. But in his books, by using the Enigma machine, which you can do on Java code on a website, you can actually get more information. And I think he's really trying to tell you the math behind how his PMH, permanent magnet holder, permanent whatever it is, momentum holder, works, which is an important thing because you're tapping off of spinning energy. It's kind of like a wheel, a spinning wheel working, but it's a spinning wheel of what we vision today, electrons, because of how we have the atom model. I agree with John there, how we have to have something to work with. But it's working, and then you just tapping off.
I was gonna say the numbers work, but that doesn't mean the theory is correct, right?
Well, he had working models, and the thing is, it all goes back to Tesla. You have to have a working model, and I believe he hid information within his books using the Enigma machine, which he understood how to work, and which was kind of cool because the Enigma machine was kind of a top secret toy. That, well, if you know what the Enigma machine is, you understand how it was at the time was a top secret toy, and it's still a cool thing. I play with it just like I play with PGP and stuff like that, but it is hackable. We're supposedly, if you don't know what PGP is, it's pretty good privacy. It's a digital encryption software. But where was I going? That is the only way to really push time, is to give star dates and locations, because otherwise, that's the whole thing about like when was the birth of Christ bit. Other than celestial navigation of knowing when there was a star shining at that day, the calendars we've all skewed so many times. Julia Caesar did it. Gregorian guy, Pope Gregory, whatever. That's the one we're using now, is his calendar. I mean, the only thing to really fall back on is celestial navigation, which means there's a pattern to it, which John, I believe, also knows about this because he was on the Antitheca machine. That if you look at how it's done, as I said a couple episodes ago, it's all primary numbers. And one of the best ways to work with anything is primary numbers deal a lot in cryptography, which kind of scares me that I think our celestial navigation is backed by some mechanical device. Otherwise, the Antitheca machine wouldn't be able to, like in a physical toy, calculate it. And that's, I don't know what to think of that yet, but it's just a fact that I have to accept, because until it's proven wrong, it works. I've seen the machine work. I'd like somebody to do a Java code of it, just like there's a Java code for the Enigma machine. But there are physical representations of it, and it does seem to work. It's a cool toy, and it also still works on a flat Earth. And
that would be like that's like an astrolabe, is that right?
The astrolabe is the one that's circular. The Antitheca machine is the one that they found in the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. That was all
in a box, right? Yeah.
and that they did X-rays of, and they were able to count the edges on each of the gears, and then figure out how many gears were on each of them. And each of the gears are primary numbers, which, when you get into, again, either calculating things and or cryptography, you have to work with primary numbers because there are too many non-primary numbers in the mix. So primary numbers are what says that it would only be here every X number of years because you're working with a primary number. So it only happens every X number of times. Like I think Jupiter was like 532. So every 532 revolutions of that particular gear is when it will be there. So it's just, well, it couldn't have been 532 because that's a primary number, not a primary number. That's you know what I'm talking about.
Right. Well, like you mean like a prime number that can like 7, can only be divided by itself in 1. Right. Yeah.
Like I believe Earth honestly falls into 1277, which is a primary number, and I believe that's Earth's primary number. And I could honestly go into how and why I believe that, but and it has to do with 360 degrees times 362.222, which is in feet the number of feet around the circumference of the equator. So, well, I say circumference thinking it's a globe type thing, but around the equator,
still a circumference. Have you ever looked into vortex-based mathematics, VBM?
I can't say it by that name, but I know that when you're dealing in cryptography, they like to use a spiral based off a trajectory off of the XYZ thing, and you shoot it to the wall, and you count the calculations off of the wall, and that's how the math is done. I look at the math side of it.
Well, I think that may be a little bit different, but I don't know. I don't know much about it. I know very little bit about it. I know enough about it to be interested in it. And we actually did a Globebusters episode about a year ago with a guy named Randy Powell, and he's got a lot of stuff on YouTube. And vortex-based mathematics, instead of we go on a 10-base system, well, it's like a 9-base system. But when they start running with these different numbers, it's essentially, I'll probably just butcher the description of this and just say, just go listen to Randy Powell, but they're like building, toroidal fields out of these mathematical sequences just sort of naturally, like fractal, like fractals. If you break a fractal, every piece of the fractal is exactly like the larger piece. And if you break that one in half, then the smaller pieces are exactly like that. And so vortex-based mathematics is similar to that in a way, but I would like, if anyone that's really into mathematics, I can do a little math. It was never really my passion. I've always been more into music and stuff, but definitely check out Randy Powell and vortex-based mathematics because there's really interesting stuff in there. Didn't want to interrupt you, but just figured I'd throw that out there because you never know what's you mentioned something to somebody and you might discover something, and that's why it's much better to have people to talk to about this stuff than to try to take on the daunting task of understanding everything, which will never happen anyway, right? So
no, I get it. It's one of the things. It's kind of like an Occam's razor bit. You exclude out what is definitely not true. What you can show is not true. And one of the things about the Antikythera, I think is how it's pronounced, because it came off out of near Antikythera or something like that at the city. But now I forgot what I was trying to. Doesn't matter. It really shows that there may be a mechanical device behind the whole movement of our whole celestial. Well, what they call you have the moving stars and the stagnant stars in the Bible. They call them that. They don't call them planets. We call them planets. NASA calls them planets because planet would be a plane that's round. Anyway, those movable ones, I believe, are on a time scheme. Whether it actually be a physical movable device up there that has gears, or whether it just mathematically works out that way. And for some reason, thank God, that they are all prime numbers. It allows you to use them as that is probably the best timekeeping thing, is if we kind of went back to the movable stars as our timekeeping thing. But
I sort of know what you mean, Angel. If you actually go and look at the stars a lot, they sort of mechanically move around, they're clicking, click, click, click.
like the time of that planet to move around the ecliptic, to get from where it is to where it is again within the ecliptic, is a prime number of I'd say cycles, because it is revolutions of the Antikythera device. The spindle moves at a constant, you can spin it fast or slow, but as it spins, the relationship between that pendulum, that prime gear in the middle moving, you look at it as a car, that would be the transmission. When that transmission moves, it spins all the gears on the outside of it. And every X number of revolutions, and on all of the gears, their prime number is a relationship to that spindle spinning, which is scary, but that it works. It works more accurate than some of our star program. And the Globebusters actually pointed it out. I had seen the device, because I'm into old devices. I had seen the device and I kind of passed it over until they responded, and I watched several dozen YouTubes on the number of gears and how it works. And there's an old guy who rebuilt one out of wood, and he actually has the plans, and you could build one. And like I said, I'd like somebody, since it's all math, to be able to put it into Java and make it so people can actually play with it in Java, since everyone can log onto a website and do it. And that would kind of, as soon as people realize that, well, I don't know what people would realize other than it would work, and it will show you where in the sky each planet, as we refer to them, would be, and it works, that this machine we should be in awe of. And it was there for thousands of years. We found it at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Somebody on this earth made it at some point in history. And that shows that we are, in Planet of Apes, we are the apes on this planet. We are still learning. Actually, it wasn't Planet of the Apes. They said that. It's Hoagland that says that. We are just coming around. And I believe that as far as my research on the pyramid itself, we did not know 100 years ago what it would have taken to understand the function of this structure. Up until 1700 years ago, in Faraday and his glass rods, we didn't even really research static electricity. Although I really believe we did. I believe that the average person didn't. Now, granted, somebody working with hay and throwing stuff would get a shock every now and then, because they're working with metal and hay, and they get a shock. And as soon as they had rugs and touched doorknobs, they got a shock. So they knew what electricity was, and static electricity existed. But up until current day, until we had cell phones, we did not realize what trickle amounts of electricity could do. We were always like, hey, what could you do with a spark? It's nothing. And we've pawned it off on nothingness. But these guys were working on the energy of a spark, and thousands of them, or enough of them to make the crack in the wall of the south side of the Queen's chamber that we dug through to find the conduit behind it. So they were working with sparks, lots of them. And it's like they had a Van de Graaff generator that was constantly making energy, and they had a Lord Kelvin generator that was constantly making sparks. You put the two of them together, and you have what I believe is the structure is doing. And until I make one that works, people can just think I'm a nut.
That's actually where it all ends up with actually doing the stuff ourselves. Everybody has some idea to do something. One man can do so much, but so many together can do way more. In that sense, just as a community of researchers, in that sense.
Right. If nothing else, it makes a waterfall. If it doesn't actually make a spark, it's going to make a really cool waterfall, because water breaks into hydrogen and oxygen, period, end of day. Can't make that stuff up. You burn it back together and make water that comes back down. That's a waterfall. End of story. It then can hold the energy down, because you're making the conduit that is coming from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. There's nothing there but the conduit that you have made. Energy will follow the path of least resistance. You have made the only path. Then I can't see what else it does.
Well, it's funny you mentioned, water is hydrogen and oxygen, and I've spoken on this a few times, but this is like so important. A few people have invented, simple modifications to carburetors where you can run internal combustion engines on water, which is pretty amazing. But the diesel engine was invented way before the regular internal combustion engine by a guy named Diesel, which is a huge coincidence. No, I'm kidding.
Seriously die on a boat cruise just before his patent was accepted. Or I'm sorry, just after his patent was accepted. And then the military was happy to take his diesel engine and deploy it through all of their. Let me also, one of the things I was working with was a gentleman where we were putting hydrogen fuel generators on vehicles. I unfortunately live in California, where we have the California Resource Air Board. And because of that, anytime you make any change to a vehicle that falls within the state, you have to get it California Air Resource Board certified, which is an expensive task. So although you as a person can take a car and put a hydrogen fuel generator on it, which really basically means you take the electricity that's coming out of your generator and you break water into hydrogen and oxygen, take the hydrogen, shove it back into your car, just like the same way that people do with nitrous oxide. Only instead of having to buy cans of nitrous oxide, you just put a little bit of water in it every day. Or you don't even have to do it every day, but like every week, because it doesn't take a lot of hydrogen. Hydrogen is awesome fuel. That aside.
So is oxygen.
So is oxygen itself, HHO gas. But you get a benefit by separating it, because if you put both of them in there, your what they call the flash point is too high and it will melt your normal car, which is why it's better on diesel engines, which are engineered for higher flash point. And it's also good to mix in normal air, as Stanley Myers, the guy that they gave a glass of lemonade to that may have had something in it that he died the next day. But he pointed out that by mixing in normal air, just like the pyramid does, because there's only one vent that comes into the pyramid that actually breaches the surface, which is the south one out of the Grand Gallery, will also pull in nitrogen, and that will bring the flash point down so it's at a dull roar instead of an explosive. So in all of this we worked into, but we were doing this in vehicles, and we were doing a pretty good job until they went, and every time you do something, and I kind of have to backtrack, before we had fuel injectors, a gentleman came up with an idea of taking the gas, putting it into like a 1 quart container and letting it form vapor, and then pushing the vapor in through the carburetor. He was getting about 200 miles to the gallon. Answer to his solution was fuel injection, because you can't inject a gas because it doesn't work. That's why if you put air into somebody's veins, they'll die when it gets into their heart. But so they went ahead and did fuel injection. And then they sell you additives that give viscosity, which help to vaporize the stuff once you inject it into there. So they help to vaporize it, but they do it at your expense instead of before it goes in. Now, when people come out with hydrogen fuel generators, which we unfortunately did, they go ahead and they put the particulate counter, which is what CARB is, on the tailpipe. And if they see not enough spent fuel particulate, they assume that not enough fuel is going in, and they make you rev your car, which is great for these guys who put nitrous on it, because all they care about is getting to the finish line faster, and they don't care if they blow their engine on the way. But for a normal everyday driver going down the street, that's not really good when you're revving your car. And now that they're computer-based, you can't really get around it. It's annoying. So what we had to do is the same thing that drug companies do, is make something that's a placebo, and just slightly better than that. We had to take our hydrogen fuel cells and make them far less efficient, just so that we can get compliance with CARB to get them into there. Because honestly, we cared about getting them sold, is what we cared about. But we had to make them less efficient in order to get permission to put them on people's vehicle, which was annoying to say the least, because I had an idea of how to make it so that it's under vacuum, which would make it more efficient, because anybody who, well, I don't know about anybody, but if you take water at still, normal everyday level, and you shove it into a vacuum, it'll start to boil all by itself at room temperature. If you take water and you throw in electricity through it, plus you put it under a vacuum, which again is what I think the pyramid is doing, you get the efficiency times 10, because it's boiling on its own, plus you're throwing electricity through it. Now, if you take Stan Meyer's bit and you put it through at a specific frequency, and they call it shattering water instead of just electrolysizing it, it's kind of like when you go up to a tree of apples and you give it one quick, shove, and then you let the apples fall, and you do it again, and you let the apples fall, and you do it again. Or if you just violently shake it, you don't get the same efficiency. You're investing more energy and you're getting less result out of the efficient energy you're putting in. But he had this down to a science. Stan Myers was, we should be, him and Tesla, and half a dozen other people, Schauberger, another guy, Victor Schauberger, should all be people that we teach. teach, but they all taught to observe nature, replicate nature, not really approve on nature, but utilize nature, where that's not what we're taught in any way. Where, it's it's a whole nother subject, but
I think Stanley Meyer at a certain point sized down the device so much that it was basically you could hold it in your two hands and you could
not only
put
that,
it in your car and you could you didn't have to get a whole new motor. No,
he made a spark plug.
Yeah,
he made a spark plug that replaced your spark plug. The only thing you had to do was change your spark plug and a few hoses.
Yeah.
It was like a turnkey solution, and they killed him because they couldn't stop him. It's kind of like if you said, look, play this frequency while you sleep, and your cells will rejuvenate, and they said, well, look, we can't stop you from doing this, so we'll have to kill you to shut you up. It's just
well, the patents of his invention are still they're now public domain.
Well, not only that, but Stan Myers, his daughter, has taken up, I think it's actually his granddaughter. I think it's his granddaughter, but has taken up the cause. And I believe his brother actually just recently died, but he was also taking it up. They didn't kind of drop it. There is a following, and I'm not an active member, but I follow what they follow of his research, because it really, it's pure, what I like to call pure research. They're just giving you the facts instead of sugarcoating them to make it so they're in the middle, where most companies will give you information, but only somehow if they make money out of it. They won't give you information to give you information. They won't say, hey, take turmeric to, be healthy and eat more real honey, not honey that's made from a bunch of chemicals with, flavor things and color coatings in.
Well, that's a problem. Here in Germany, we have a restriction that if you buy honey, it actually has to contain about 70% of real honey. That's a regulation over
Why
here.
Can't it be 100%?
Yeah, that's what I said. It's
I get raw honey and natural maple syrup, because otherwise you're just getting high fructose corn syrup.
I have a friend that
what is the problem in America? In America, there are no regulations for something to be called honey. If you put only syrup and water, or even you put in peanut butter with a coloring agent that it seems to look like honey, you can call it honey in America. There are no regulations whatsoever.
You put gelatinous goo with honey colored coloring, honey flavored flavoring, honey smelling, and a couple of other things to make it, act a little like honey. You call it honey. They'll probably be able to print it out of a replicator shortly with all chemicals, and you can be whatever you want to be, but you're not eating real food. You're eating a facade. You're eating a dream. I don't know what you're eating.
Well, I've a test for it isn't 100% proof, but what you can basically eliminate a lot of fake honey is if you put honey on a spoon, if you get your spoon of real honey, you put it in a cold glass of water. Wait about 20 minutes, and if the honey is still on the spoon, almost like the same you put it in, then it's probably real honey, because if you have fake honey, it will dissolve in cold water.
Right. Yeah, that's 100% true. But, it's the same thing with maple syrup. It's unfortunately the same thing with salt. We chemically make salt because it's more efficient to chemically make something than to rely on the variable of nature. But the whole system was made with the variable of nature, and we like to dismiss nature. And, it's God's food versus man's food. And I kind of try to stay with God's food.
Hey, listen, guys, I'm going to have to run soon, but I wanted to just respond to a couple things that you just mentioned, because you guys are so much fun to talk to you. I could talk to you guys for just hours and hours and hours, but I do have to go in a minute. I'm just going to run down this list really quick, but I'm going to start from the bottom, because just a few minutes ago, I was given some advice to a friend, and I told them to season their food with turmeric and cumin as a rule. And you just said turmeric. That's my my favorite spice of all time because, just so many benefits to, well, I say it wrong. Yes, it's turmeric. Okay, whatever. But yeah, so that was really funny. I just wanted to mention that. Great stuff. Great stuff. Good for you. And then in terms of like all these fake honey and fake maple syrup, yeah, and that's been around for years. And it's so silly because do you know how like difficult it is to make a bottle of Aunt Jemima's fake maple syrup? And all you have to do is put a freaking tap in a tree and it comes out forever well, not forever, it comes out for free. And, it's like what happens is the U.S. government actually subsidizes this synthesized garbage so that it's cheaper and easier to get. And they really put a hurting on the bee farmers. So they're paying taxes and they're leveraged up to their eyes in debt. And
just real quick, have you considered that they want to push the high fructose corn syrup everywhere they can?
Yes. Yep. That and antibiotics, because that's a recipe for candidus overgrowth, which I think is probably, I don't know, maybe 25% of all health problems is a imbalance in the, the bacteria in your gut. So yeah, I think that is intentional. It's obviously must be intentional. But real quick, backing up, Stan Meyer, before him, Stan Meyer, from what I gather, got his ideas from something called the Winnipeg carburetor, and he built on that. And Tom Ogle was the guy that was suicided in I guess the 80s, some 70s, 80s, something like that. I don't remember, but pretty recently. And this is what I think happened to that technology, because you can literally run an internal combustion engine on basically water, as long as you have the carburetor and the spark plugs right, and like you said, as long as you get the vapor mix right. Oxygen and hydrogen are extremely combustible. They'll push a piston just like any other explosion inside of a compression chamber, right? And so we don't need petroleum. We don't need quote unquote fossil fuels. But unfortunately, the dollar is tied to petroleum, the petrodollar. And so it's just unthinkable for these people to allow us to have free energy. So it's a shame. The last thing that you mentioned, and I'll probably stick around for 5 more minutes, but is salt. We use all you can get here is iodized table salt, because people were allegedly not getting all their iodine. Nowadays, if you go and look at table salt under the microscope, it actually has little shards of glass in it. And so I would suggest to anybody, it's not that expensive, but instead of getting salt from the store, you have to order it. Be careful where you order it from, but you have to order pink salt from the Himalayan mountain, and it's just pure salt. It's natural. It doesn't have glass in it. So, but yeah, sorry to rush through those, but I could have gone on for hours on each one of those, but I just wanted to respond to what y'all were saying, and I'll probably hang for 5 more minutes, and then I do got to go.
Stan was even better than that. The first one you spritzed it in was actually water. He hit it with a frequency that did what he called shattering, because you haven't been here for a bunch of things, but water, when you let it cool, it's only because we've added energy, heat to it, that it is liquid, but it is a crystal. It forms ice, which is a crystal. So just like you can play with liquid salt, you can play with liquid ice, which is water. You can fracture it just like you can fracture a window pane by playing the right frequency. It's harmonic. You can fracture water. So the first bang he got was fracturing the water. Then it was recompressed and then hit with electricity or a spark to explode it. He got 2 bangs out of every spritz. It was, he was above his time.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. I didn't know that. That's sweet.
Yeah. Thanks for explaining that. So you never think about everything, do you?
When you separate water into its respective parts, it's a 1 to 1700 ratio. I think it's high 1600s, but 17 is a nicer number. And it's, that's why 1 gallon of water is worth like 1700 of HHO, 1700 gallons of HHO gas. So there is a compression or decompression by separating. And then there's another, explosion or pressure by burning. So you can get efficiency by playing with both sides of it.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, and the final thing I'll say is I think I know where that technology went. I think they did implement it, but only in the major jetliners. So, like chemtrails, everybody thinks, oh, they're poisoning us. I'm 99.9% convinced that that's not the case. They're just using some form of free energy fuel, and the vapors no longer form contrails. They don't dissipate. They stick around and form clouds because it's mostly, water, hydrogen, oxygen, whatever, instead of like, jet fuel residue or whatever. And when people started noticing this, instead of saying, yeah, we're not paying for fuel anymore, they started making these grandiose, chemtrail checkerboards through the sky to push the narrative and push the fear porn. So that's about where I'm at on chemtrails.
They also use it in vehicles like the Harrier if you look at, I don't know if you've ever been to the air shows, but they'll mention that they dump water into the exhaust. And by dumping water into the exhaust, it immediately boils. And by immediately boiling, you're getting the compression of the extra push of the water boiling or separating into its, at that point it would be boiling. It would kind of be like steam. That's not actually electrolysis. That's a different thing, but it's the same principle that they're working with the compression of just playing with water.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for sure. Well, listen, guys, I love you guys. Thanks so much for having me on. I've got to run, and we'll definitely do this again. It was great meeting you. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name again.
Angel.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I will remember that. Are you on YouTube?
Oh yes, he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, if you could put the contact information in the show notes.
Already.
Oh, awesome. Perfect.
Karen.
Well, listen, guys.
Good that you
Thanks.
can all hang out then, John.
What's that?
Hang out.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
It was great having you on the Hangout.
Oh yeah, it's always
Great
a pleasure,
having
guys. Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll do it again real soon, I'm sure. Definitely. I always learn something new with you guys. Always meet brilliant people who are flat earthers and are way smarter than me, and that's a good feeling. It really is. So awesome. Love you guys, and I'm gonna peace out now. But y'all have a good one. Be good.
Right.
Thank you, John.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Feedback. Who's it? Series again.
I'm the feedback. Shit.
Yeah, some feedback.
Because he shares the videos, and when he shares the videos, he shares the video and his audio.
Right. Just to say, we have nearly 4 hours. Do you think we kind of started rounding off and rounding up now because it's nearly 1 o'clock in the morning here?
But that's actually worked out perfect because it's almost 5 here, and I actually have something I have to do before the doors close.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
All right.
People know, but I'm going to go to Holland and see series next week. So next Sunday I'll be in Holland.
Cool.
Have a great trip.
Everybody wants to meet Karen.
Oh, unless something happens drastic, Angel, do you want to do next Sunday then?
Yeah, it sounds great. I'd say if you have a cell phone that keeps the levelness, you have those ones, you should just, even though I know what the results would be, do a video on it.
Is that for everybody in the chat room?
Well, it's just for anybody who flies on an airplane, just to, you don't have to prove it to yourself. Actually, anybody who flies should prove it to themselves. It's easy now that everyone has a level at their disposal that they could, play with that whole bit. Globebusters did a whole episode on how it is not supposed to change. They say so themselves that it should record the rotation of the Earth, how it's engineered to do.
Mm-hmm.
And this it proves it's not.
So should we come back and, well, I know that Artist can't because he hasn't got a camera, but we usually give a hug. I know that John just went then, but we have a end of group hug. So we just, Angel series. Yay! Thank you everybody watching in the chat room. Thank you everybody who's watched or will watch this video. Another great hangout with Artist, John the Morgile, and Angel and series, and Patricia who's gone now. Anyway, watching. Looks like we'll be back next Sunday. Anyway, from all of us, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Everybody say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Oh, wait, hug for the world. Hug for our friends on the panel and in the chat room. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.